Hey there, tonight we're uncovering the battle for Christmas, where festive cheer clashed with religious fervor and political power. What you're about to discover reveals how this holiday's origins are as turbulent as they are merry. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. If you ever thought Christmas was all about the jingle bells and merry elves, think again. The story of how a sleepy town in Bethlehem became the epicenter of the holiday season is more twisty than a candy cane and more tangled than a string of last year's lights. It's a story that starts not with a manger, but with a Roman party so wild it makes New Year's Eve look like a book club meeting. Enter Saturnalia, the OG of festive chaos. This was the Romans' annual week-long bash that kicked off on December 17th. Picture this, a city where social norms do a headstand. Slaves were served by their masters, gambling was legalized, and everyone wore their best ugly toga. It was a full-on festival of mischief wrapped in a toga, complete with gift-giving and candle lighting. If it sounds familiar, that's because many of our modern Christmas traditions were cribbed from this ancient revelry. But what does this have to do with Christmas, you ask? Well, the early Christians were a savvy bunch. They knew they needed to get their religious foot in the door without getting trampled by the Saturnalia parade. So, in a stroke of tactical brilliance, they decided to align the celebration of Jesus' birth with these already popular festivities. Think of it as the ultimate PR move, like dropping a surprise album during the Super Bowl halftime show. Now, here's the kicker. Jesus probably wasn't born on December 25th. The Bible doesn't drop a date, and historical evidence suggests a more plausible springtime birthday. Shepherds watching their flocks by night, more like shepherds watching the grazing season. But let's face it, a December birthday fit the bill for the church's grand strategy. By the 4th century, Pope Julius I made it official, and December 25th was marked on the calendar as the day to celebrate Christ's birth. Yet, as the church was trying to sprinkle a little religion over the Saturnalia madness, they faced the Herculean task of keeping the unruly traditions in check. Picture trying to host a quiet book club meeting in a nightclub. The church had to contend with people who were more interested in party hats than halos. This required a delicate balance of celebration and moderation, like trying to balance a Christmas tree star on top of a leaning pine. But why did aligning with Saturnalia matter so much? It was all about building bridges, not walls. Early Christians were a minority sect trying to gain traction in a Roman world. By co-opting a popular pagan festival, they could spread their message far and wide, while avoiding the ire of those who preferred Bacchus to Bethlehem. This was less about theological purity and more about survival in a religious marketplace. So, when you hang those stockings or sip on eggnog, remember that you're partaking in a celebration that has been carefully curated and crafted over centuries. It's a mashup of merriment from the Romans, the Christians, and a host of others who saw the value in a midwinter celebration. But let's not forget the economic angle. Saturnalia was also a time when markets boomed. Vendors thrived on the sale of gifts and festive goodies. The tradition of gift-giving during Saturnalia likely paved the way for our modern Christmas shopping sprees, a tradition that continues to make retailers sing hallelujah as sales skyrocket each December. In the grand scheme, the evolution of Christmas from a humble birth in Bethlehem to a global phenomenon is a testament to the power of cultural adaptation. It's a holiday that has been shaped, reshaped, and sometimes shaken up by the needs and whims of society. And while the myths are charming, the reality is a fascinating tapestry woven from threads of history, culture, and a fair bit of ingenuity. So next time you find yourself knee-deep in wrapping paper, remember that you're not just celebrating a holiday. You're part of an ancient tradition that has seen emperors, popes, and everyday folks all try to put their stamp on what it means to celebrate. It's a battle for Christmas that spans 2 millennia and counting, and you've got a front row seat to the show. As we leapfrog into the Middle Ages, it's clear that Christmas had morphed into something more closely resembling a raucous Mardi Gras than the silent night we often serenade. Picture medieval Europe, where the Yuletide spirit was less about peace on earth and more about letting your hair down, way down. This period saw Christmas as a time of debauchery, with festivities that would make even Dionysus blush. The church, ever the party pooper with a higher calling, faced a colossal task: how to sprinkle a little sanctity over the boisterous bacchanalia that Christmas had become. Now, give it to the Middle Ages to turn a holy day into a holy smokes. The Christmas season was a time when the social order flipped on its head, reminiscent of Saturnalia's topsy-turvy traditions. Let's break it down. Peasants could demand alms from the rich, carolers sang bawdy tunes, and revelers paraded through the streets in what can only be described as medieval cosplay meets drunken revelry. It was the ultimate holiday mashup, blending religious solemnity with a carnival atmosphere. Enter the church, stage left, desperately trying to regain control over the festive chaos. If the holiday season were a medieval tavern brawl, the church was the innkeeper trying to keep the peace amidst flying tankards. They needed to rein in the excess without killing the buzz, an ecclesiastical tightrope walk if there ever was one. But the church wasn't just fighting the urge to party. They were battling for the soul of Christmas itself. After all, what good is a religious holiday if it gets lost in a sea of ale and jester hats? Cue the Puritans, who were about as much fun as a snowstorm in June. Fast forward to the 17th century, and these folks took a hard look at Christmas and saw not a celebration of Christ's birth, but a threat to social order. In England, Oliver Cromwell and his merry band of summer reformers saw Christmas festivities as a direct line to moral decay. Cromwell, who never met a party he couldn't ruin, led a movement to clamp down on Christmas, banning it outright in 1647. His goal, to purify the nation of what he viewed as ungodly merrymaking. Cromwell's Christmas crackdown was no small feat. Imagine trying to cancel Christmas, the holiday with more staying power than Mariah Carey's December royalty checks. Yet, for a brief period, Cromwell and his cronies managed to do just that, replacing carols and feasts with fasting and psalmer reflection. Christmas trees were out, and sermons were in. It was like swapping out your favorite holiday playlist for Gregorian chants. Across the pond, the Puritans in the Massachusetts Bay Colony were taking notes. They, too, saw Christmas as a potential powder keg of disorder. In 1659, they enacted a law that banned the celebration of Christmas altogether, fining offenders 5 shillings, a princely sum for a bit of Yuletide cheer. To the Puritans, Christmas was not only a distraction from their austere lifestyle, but a vestige of Catholicism they were eager to shed. But why all this Grinch-like behavior? Well, the Puritans feared that Christmas celebrations encouraged laziness, indulgence, and even crime, a trifecta of vices that threatened their vision of a disciplined, godly community. To them, Christmas was a slippery slope, a merry little window through which sin could sneak in and set up shop. The Puritans were all about work ethic and restraint, and a holiday that encouraged the opposite was seen as a direct challenge to their moral fabric. Naturally, the people weren't too keen on giving up their favorite holiday, and resistance simmered beneath the surface. Over time, the ban on Christmas celebrations proved about as effective as a chocolate teapot. Folks were still determined to celebrate, often in clandestine gatherings that maintained the spirit of the season, even if they had to keep it under wraps. The allure of Christmas was too strong, its traditions too deeply rooted in the cultural soil to be easily uprooted. The economic implications of this ban were significant as well. Merchants and tradesmen who relied on the holiday season for a boost in business found themselves in a bind. The absence of Christmas meant a dip in profits, as the usual spike in demand for festive goods vanished. It was a case of ideology clashing with economic reality, a theme as old as time and as relevant today as ever. As the Puritans and Cromwell attempted to reshape Christmas to fit their worldview, they inadvertently highlighted the holiday's enduring power. Despite their best efforts, the Christmas spirit proved resilient, a testament to the holiday's ability to adapt and thrive even in the face of adversity. The battle for Christmas was far from over, and while the Puritans may have won a few battles, the war for the heart of the holiday would continue to rage on. So, as we leave behind the psalmer tones of Puritan sermons and the austere halls of Cromwell's England, we're left with a Christmas that is both a battleground and a beacon of resilience. a holiday that has weathered the storms of history and emerged, time and again, with its bells ringing and its lights shining bright. The story of Christmas is a tale of adaptation and survival, a testament to the human spirit's ability to find joy and celebration even in the darkest of times. And so, we stand on the threshold of the next chapter, ready to explore how Christmas would continue its evolution. From Puritan bans to Victorian revivals, the saga of this holiday is far from over. What's next in the battle for Christmas? Stay tuned, because if history has taught us anything, it's that Christmas is one holiday that refuses to be boxed in or boxed out. As we leave behind the puritanical Grinch fest, we leap straight into the Industrial Revolution, a time when Christmas got a shiny new coat of paint. Imagine a world where smokestacks were the new skyscrapers and factories churned out more than just soot. It was the age of machines, and with it came a makeover for the holiday season that would have made even the most fastidious Puritan do a double take. Enter Charles Dickens, the man who put the merry back into Christmas. In 1843, Dickens published A Christmas Carol, a novella that would redefine the holiday spirit faster than you can say bah humbug. This wasn't just a ghost story. It was a social commentary wrapped in tinsel. Scrooge, the miserly protagonist, is as synonymous with Christmas as eggnog, thanks to his transformation from grumpy penny pincher to the embodiment of generosity. Now, why did Dickens bother with Scrooge and ghosts? The Industrial Revolution had turned society topsy-turvy. Urbanization was rampant. People were packed into cities like sardines in a can. The working class was slogging through 14-hour workdays, with working conditions that made a day at the office seem like a spa retreat. Dickens, the original social justice warrior, saw an opportunity to remind his readers that Christmas wasn't just about survival. It was about kindness and community. And here's the kicker. A Christmas Carol wasn't just a heartwarming tale. It was a game changer. The novella sold out its first run of 6,000 copies by Christmas Eve, proving that even in the mid-19th century, a good story could be the ultimate influencer. Dickens' vision of Christmas as a time for family and charity resonated powerfully, helping to solidify these themes in the public consciousness. It was as if he took the chaotic holiday spirit and gave it a moral compass, steering Christmas away from its rowdy past. But let's not forget the economic backdrop. The Victorian era was a time of unprecedented economic growth, and Christmas was ripe for commercialization. The rise of consumer culture meant that the holiday became a season of shopping, as much as singing carols. Christmas cards, introduced in 1843, the same year as A Christmas Carol, became a hit, with the first batch of 1,000 cards selling briskly at $1 each. Before you knew it, Christmas shopping was a thing, and retailers were cashing in on the festive frenzy. Meanwhile, across the pond, the American Santa Claus was emerging from a cauldron of cultural influences, like a Yuletide Frankenstein. This jolly old man wasn't born in a North Pole workshop, but rather in the melting pot of New York City. The Dutch had brought over Sinterklaas, and from there, Santa Claus began to take shape, blending European folklore with American ingenuity. It was the 1823 poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, or popularly known as The Night Before Christmas, that really catapulted Santa into the spotlight. Here's where the marketing magic kicks in. Coca-Cola, in the 1930, commissioned artist Haddon Sundblom to create a series of ads featuring Santa Claus. Sundblom's Santa, with his rosy cheeks and rotund belly, became an indelible image of the holiday. Before long, Santa was less about the religious roots and more about the jingle in retailers' pockets. Santa Claus, meet capitalism, a match made in holiday heaven. But let's pause before we get swept away by nostalgic visions of sugar plum fairies. The reality was a tad more sobering. The Industrial Revolution, while ushering in economic progress, came with its own set of challenges. The wealth gap was as wide as Santa's waistband after a cookie binge, while the middle and upper classes enjoyed their newfound ability to indulge in festive excess. The working poor often found themselves on the outside looking in, peering at the lavish shop displays. And yet, this is where the genius of Dickens and the American Santa truly shines. They offered a vision of Christmas that was accessible to all, a holiday not bound by the constraints of wealth, but open to anyone with the capacity for kindness and joy. It was a cultural pivot that allowed Christmas to become a universal celebration, transcending the class divides of the time. So, as the snow began to fall on the bustling streets of the 19th century, well, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, Christmas had morphed into something familiar yet new. It was a holiday that celebrated not just the birth of Christ or the turning of the year, but the enduring human spirit. A time for family, for giving, and yes, for a little bit of shopping too. As we continue our historical sleigh ride, keep your eyes peeled for the next twist in the road. The story of Christmas is far from finished, and there's more history waiting to unwrap. Stay tuned, because this isn't just a seasonal tale. It's a saga of survival, reinvention, and the timeless quest for a little peace on Earth. So here we are, standing on the cusp of a new era, where Christmas in America was about to get its official seal of approval. The year was 1870, and the United States was still licking its wounds from the Civil War. The country needed a little cheer, a bit of unity, and what better candidate than Christmas to do the heavy lifting? But like any good political drama, making it a federal holiday wasn't a simple wreath-hanging ceremony. It all started with President Ulysses S. Grant, the man who decided that Christmas needed a promotion from a popular pastime to a federally recognized holiday. On June 26, 1870, Congress passed the law that declared Christmas, along with New Year's Day, Independence Day, and Thanksgiving, a federal holiday. The goal: to foster unity in a nation that had been torn apart faster than a kid ripping open a Christmas present. But don't let the warm fuzzies fool you. There was plenty of political maneuvering beneath that Christmas tree. Grant and his contemporaries saw the holiday as a tool for economic recovery. The idea was to stimulate the economy through the burgeoning trend of Christmas shopping. Retailers could practically hear the cash registers chiming like Christmas bells. And let's not forget the immigrant wave crashing onto American shores. America's cultural stew was being stirred with new ingredients from Europe, and each group brought its own holiday traditions. For German immigrants, the Christmas tree was a must-have. If you think about it, the Christmas tree is the ultimate piece of cultural appropriation, an evergreen symbol that transcended its roots to become as American as apple pie. The Germans had been decking their halls with trees since the 16th century, but it was Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's German-born husband, who gave the tradition a royal boost in 1848. When an illustration of the royal family gathered around their Christmas tree appeared in a popular magazine, the idea spread like wildfire across the pond. In America, the Christmas tree became a symbol of the holiday's melting pot nature. By 1851, the first Christmas tree lot in America opened, and by the time Grant inked his holiday deal, trees were practically sprouting in every living room from New York to San Francisco. And get this, New York City, ever the trendsetter, started the tradition of the public Christmas tree in Madison Square Park in 1912. Talk about a belated Christmas gift. Christmas was also a battleground for cultural identity, especially among immigrants who were trying to blend in while holding onto their roots. For many, celebrating Christmas in the American style was a way to fit in, to show they were part of the national fabric. But it was also a way to maintain a connection to their homeland, to keep their traditions alive in a new world that was both welcoming and alien. The post-Civil War era was a time of rapid industrialization and urbanization, and Christmas became a way to navigate these changes. It was a holiday that could be both personal and communal, secular and sacred. It was a way to find meaning in a world that was changing faster than you could say, Merry Christmas. And yet, the holiday was not immune to controversy. Take the political wrangling over the public celebration of Christmas. Some folks argued that it was a violation of the separation of church and state. After all, Christmas was rooted in Christianity, and the U.S. Constitution was pretty clear about keeping religion out of government. But proponents of the holiday argued that Christmas was more than just a religious celebration. It was a cultural event, a time of unity and goodwill. It was a debate that echoed the larger conversation about what it meant to be an American in a country that was becoming increasingly diverse. Economically, Christmas was a boon. The holiday season became the most lucrative time of year for retailers, a tradition that continues today with Black Friday and Cyber Monday. In 1870, the idea of a Christmas shopping season was still in its infancy, but it was growing, fueled by the desire to give and the need to spend. If you think your holiday credit card bill is daunting, imagine being a Victorian-era entrepreneur trying to navigate this new economic landscape. And then there's the Santa Claus effect. As Santa became more ingrained in the American consciousness, he became a symbol of the holiday's commercial side. Retailers used his image to entice shoppers, and children across the country wrote letters to him, hoping he'd bring them the latest toys and trinkets. Santa was less about the spiritual and more about the spectacle, a jolly, red-suited embodiment of the holiday's commercial appeal. But here's the kicker. For all its commercialism and political wrangling, Christmas in post-Civil War America was also a time of genuine connection and reflection. Families gathered around the hearth, exchanging gifts and stories, creating traditions that would be passed down through generations. It was a time to step back from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, to appreciate the people around you, and to find joy in the simple things. So as we wrap up this chapter in the saga of Christmas, remember that the holiday's history is as complex and layered as a fruitcake. It's a story of adaptation and survival, of cultural exchange and economic opportunity. It's a holiday that has weathered wars and controversies, that has evolved and adapted to fit the needs of its time. And while the myths may be charming, the reality is far more interesting. A tale of human ingenuity and resilience, of finding light in the darkest of times. And as we get ready to dive into the next chapter of Christmas history, keep in mind that the story is far from over. There's more to explore, more to uncover, and more to celebrate. So stay tuned, because the journey is just beginning. As we mosey into the 20th century, Christmas is about to undergo a transformation that makes Cinderella's fairy godmother look like an amateur. If the 19th century was about setting the stage, the 20th century was showtime. Enter the era of consumerism, where the holiday spirit got a glittery facelift, and Santa became as synonymous with shopping as he was with sleigh rides. Let's start with Coca-Cola, a company that took Santa Claus from a jolly old legend to a marketing megastar. Before Coke got its hands on him, Santa's image was as inconsistent as your aunt's fruitcake. He was everything from a tall, gaunt figure to an elf-sized sprite. In 1931, Coca-Cola commissioned Haddon Sundblom to create a Santa that was both merry and marketable. Sundblom's Santa was the full package, rosy-cheeked, plump, and perpetually cheerful, a living embodiment of holiday cheer. This Santa was designed to associate the joy of the holiday with the refreshment of a cold Coke. Talk about a brand partnership that would make even the Kardashians envious. The impact was immediate. Sundblom's Santa became a cultural icon, making appearances in Coca-Cola's Christmas advertisements for over 3 decades. His image was so influential that it solidified the red and white clad Santa as the definitive version in the eyes of millions. It was a masterstroke of marketing that turned Santa into a symbol not just of generosity, but of consumerism itself. And let's face it, once Santa was in bed with capitalism, there was no turning back. But Coca-Cola's Santa wasn't the only force pushing Christmas into the commercial limelight. The post-World War Roman II boom saw consumerism skyrocket, and Christmas was the perfect vehicle to channel this newfound economic optimism. The 1940s and 50s were a time when Americans were buoyed by prosperity, and the holiday season became a period of unparalleled shopping frenzy. Holiday sales were seen as an economic barometer, making or breaking the fiscal year for retailers. By the mid-20th century, Christmas shopping had become a cultural phenomenon. Black Friday, a term reportedly coined in Philadelphia in the 1960s, marked the beginning of the holiday shopping season, transforming the day after Thanksgiving into a chaotic retail free-for-all. And it wasn't just about the shopping. The concept of the Christmas spirit was being packaged and sold, sometimes literally, as consumers were bombarded with a blizzard of advertisements encouraging them to spend, give more, and ultimately buy into the idea of happiness as something you could purchase. This commercialization wasn't without its critics. Social commentators and cultural critics lamented the shift from a season of goodwill to one of rampant consumerism. Take, for example, Charlie Brown, the eternal pessimist in the Peanuts comic strip. In A Charlie Brown Christmas, which aired in 1965, Charlie Brown is disillusioned by the commercialization of the holiday, a sentiment that resonated with many viewers. The show was a subtle yet powerful critique of the holiday's materialistic turn, and its message remains relevant today. Despite these critiques, the economic impact of Christmas was undeniable. By the end of the 20th century, holiday sales could account for as much as 30% of a retailer's annual revenue. The National Retail Federation reported in 1999 that the average American household spent nearly $1,000 on holiday gifts and decorations. That's a number that would make even Santa's eyes bulge, and it underscores the immense financial stakes tied to the holiday season. But let's not forget the human element amidst all this commerce. While the holiday frenzy was in full swing, many families found ways to keep the spirit of Christmas alive beyond the shopping malls. Traditions like decorating the Christmas tree, baking cookies, and volunteering at shelters became ways to reconnect with the heart of the holiday. It was a time to gather with loved ones and create memories that would outlast the wrapping paper and price tags. Curiously, the commercialization of Christmas also had a democratizing effect. The proliferation of mass-produced goods meant that Christmas was no longer the domain of the wealthy. Middle and lower-income families could partake in holiday festivities, albeit on a smaller scale. This accessibility helped cement Christmas as a unifying cultural event, transcending socioeconomic barriers and becoming a holiday that, at least in theory, everyone could celebrate. And what about the myths? Those comforting tales we love to tell ourselves. The myth of Christmas as a purely religious celebration, untouched by the grubby hands of commerce, is precisely that, a myth. From its earliest incarnations, whether in Saturnalia or medieval Yuletide, Christmas has always been a mix of the sacred and the secular, the spiritual and the material. It's a holiday that has thrived on its ability to adapt and absorb, to evolve with the times while retaining a core of warmth and generosity. So, as we wrap up this historical sleigh ride, let's take stock of the legacy and significance of Christmas. The holiday is a testament to human adaptability, a celebration that has weathered centuries of change and emerged as a multifaceted festival that can be both deeply personal and widely communal. It's a holiday that's as much about the gifts we give as the connections we forge, a time to reflect on the past and look forward to the future. In the end, perhaps the true meaning of Christmas isn't found in the presents under the tree or the sales at the mall. It's in the stories we tell, the traditions we keep, and the ways we find to celebrate the season with those we love. It's a holiday that invites us to pause amid the hustle and bustle, to remember that the greatest gift of all is the time we spend together. So, whether you're sipping eggnog by the fire, braving the shopping crowds, or simply enjoying a quiet moment of reflection, take a moment to appreciate the rich tapestry of history that has shaped Christmas into the holiday we know today. It's a story of resilience and reinvention, a celebration of the human spirit that continues to shine bright, no matter how tangled the lights or how long the shopping list. And with that, dear listener, we've reached the end of our journey through the history of Christmas. It's been a wild ride through time, from ancient Rome to the modern day, with plenty of twists and turns along the way. So the next time you hang your stocking or trim the tree, remember the centuries of tradition that have paved the way for your celebrations. Here's to the enduring magic of Christmas, a holiday that, much like a certain jolly old elf, continues to spread joy and wonder year after year. Sparta, the town that put the war in warrior, wasn't always the military monolith it eventually became. In the early days, Sparta was more like that scrappy underdog in a sports movie, think Rocky, but with spears and sandals. Nestled in the Eurotas Valley, Sparta was geographically blessed with fertile land, surrounded by mountains like a defensive perimeter set by Mother Nature herself. This natural fortress was both a blessing and a curse. While it kept invaders at bay, it also meant that the Spartans had limited room to expand. Cue the classic Spartan solution. When in doubt, train a world-class army and take what you need. This brings us to the heart of early Spartan society, a curious blend of necessity and ambition. The socio-political structure of Sparta was as rigid as the battle lines they would later form on the field. At the top of the pyramid sat two kings. Yes, two, because apparently one king wasn't enough to handle the bureaucratic chaos of running a small city-state. Below the kings was the Gerousia, a council of elders who, let's be honest, probably spent most of their time grumbling about kids these days. Then came the Apella, an assembly of Spartan citizens who got to vote on things, but only the things the Gerousia deemed worthy, keeping the illusion of democracy alive and well. Now, let's talk economics, because no good war machine runs on grit alone. Sparta was not exactly the Silicon Valley of ancient Greece. They didn't trade in exotic goods or boast bustling marketplaces. Instead, their economy was largely agrarian, relying on the labor of the Helots, a subjugated population that did the heavy lifting, quite literally. The Helots were essentially state-owned serfs, and they outnumbered the Spartans by daunting margins. Some sources suggest a ratio as high as 7-1. That's enough to make any Spartan lose sleep at night, worrying about Helot uprisings. The solution? Keep them in line with a military so fearsome that the thought of rebellion would be a one-way ticket to the afterlife. This precarious economic setup meant that Sparta had to focus on one thing they could control: military excellence. It was a matter of survival. And let's not forget the irony. While other Greek city-states were busy philosophizing about democracy and the arts, Sparta was perfecting the fine art of war. It wasn't just about defense. It was about ensuring the Helots didn't decide to play a real-life version of Les Miserables. Spartan boys were drafted into the agoge at the tender age of 7. Imagine sending a second grader to boot camp. This state-sponsored education system was less about reading and writing and more about learning how to survive on a diet of black broth and test your pain threshold by wrestling in the nude. The goal was simple: create soldiers who were as tough as the mountains they called home. And why stop there? Spartan women were expected to be just as resilient. They didn't train for war, but they did train for life, running households and managing estates, while the men were off doing what Spartans do best. Now, about those PR tactics. The Spartans are famous for never surrendering, a reputation immortalized at Thermopylae. But let's be real, the idea of Spartans never giving up an inch of ground is more myth than reality. Sure, they were tenacious, but they knew when to retreat to fight another day. The whole never surrender SH-stick is more of a Hollywood invention, like thinking all cowboys wore white hats and never missed a shot. Spartans were pragmatic. They understood that living to fight another day was sometimes the smarter play. The reality of Spartan life was harsh, and that's an understatement. It was a society built on the knife's edge of discipline and fear. Yet, the legend of Sparta, the idea of a warrior society that never backs down, remains irresistible. It's the kind of narrative that appeals to our love for the underdog, the fighter who stands tall against impassable odds. But as with most legends, the truth is more complex. Sparta's military prowess was not just a product of bravery or honor, but of necessity, geography, and a societal structure that prioritized survival above all else. As we delve deeper into the story of Sparta, remember that the legend is only half the story. The other half is a tale of a small city-state that used its limited resources to become one of the most formidable military forces of the ancient world. It's a story of grit, strategy, and a little bit of luck. And it all started with a few kings, a council of grumpy elders, and a lot of land-hungry neighbors. So, next time you hear tales of Spartan glory, remember that behind every grand legend lies a reality that's just as compelling, if a bit less glamorous. Now, while Sparta's rise to military supremacy is often shrouded in the misty allure of legend, it's high time we wade through the fog and dive into the gritty reality of the Spartan education system, better known as the agoge. Imagine sending your kid off to school where the curriculum is less about reciting the ABCs and more about embracing the ABCs of survival: agility, brutality, and combat. That's right, folks. Spartan youth were thrust into this grueling regime at the tender age of 7. While kids today are mastering finger paints, Spartan boys were mastering the fine art of spear thrusts and shield holds. The agoge wasn't your run-of-the-mill educational institution. Think of it as a blend between a military academy and a survivalist boot camp, with a side order of psychological warfare. Young Spartans were expected to endure a lifestyle that would make a Navy SEAL retreat to a spa day. And the diet, let's just say it was a culinary experience that would send modern nutritionists into a tailspin. Picture this: a staple dish known as black broth, a concoction so infamous that it supposedly kept visiting dignitaries at bay. The recipe: pork, blood, salt, and vinegar. It's the kind of meal that would make even the hardiest of foodies reconsider their appetite. Living conditions in the Agoge were as Spartan as you might expect, pun fully intended. Boys were given one garment to last a year, encouraging them to toughen up against the elements. Luxury was as welcome as a snowstorm in July. They slept on makeshift beds of reeds, which they had to gather themselves. And forget about Mom packing a lunchbox. Finding food was part of their daily challenge. Stealing was encouraged, but getting caught, that was a lesson in the consequences of failure. You see, the goal was to cultivate cunning and resourcefulness, qualities essential for a future warrior. But let's not romanticize this process too much. The Agoge was brutal, unforgiving, and often downright cruel. The system was designed to weed out the weak, a kind of ancient natural selection with societal backing. Those who survived were forged into elite warriors, but at what cost? The romantic notion of the invincible Spartan warrior quickly crumbles when you consider the human toll. Not every boy emerged a hardened soldier. Some, undoubtedly, paid the ultimate price for this rigorous upbringing. Now, let's debunk the myth of Spartan invincibility. Sure, they were formidable, but they were far from unbeatable. History loves to gloss over the fact that Spartan forces suffered defeats just like any other army. Take the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, where the Thebans handed the Spartans a crushing defeat. This was no small skirmish. It was a seismic shift in the power dynamics of ancient Greece. The Theban victory was like a wake-up call, shattering the myth of Spartan military supremacy. Their loss was a reminder that even the mightiest can fall when strategy falters or hubris clouds judgment. So why, you might ask, does the legend persist? Why do we still picture Spartans as these invulnerable warriors clad in bronze and glory? Well, myths have a funny way of outliving reality. They capture the imagination, offering narratives that are cleaner, simpler, and far more palatable than messy historical truths. The idea of the invincible Spartan plays into our fascination with the archetype of the warrior, resilient, unwavering, and fearsome. It's a narrative that resonates with those who romanticize strength and valor over vulnerability and failure. But let's not get too caught up in the myth. The real story of Sparta is far more nuanced. It's a tale of a society that balanced on the knife edge of survival, where military excellence was not just an ideal, but a necessity. The Agoge was a reflection of this ethos, a crucible designed to mold boys into the soldiers Sparta needed to maintain its precarious position in the Greek world. And while the Spartans may not have been invincible, their legacy endures, not because they were perfect, but because they were human, flawed, yet striving for greatness against the odds. As we delve further into the annals of Spartan history, remember that behind every legend lies a complex web of truths and half-truths. The story of the Spartan warriors is not just one of might, but of survival, strategy, and the unyielding human spirit. And while the legend of their invincibility may be more smoke than fire, the impact of their reality continues to spark our imagination. So stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of Spartan society, one thread at a time. Now, as we unravel more of Sparta's tale, let's pivot from the gritty training grounds of the Agoge to the equally strategic, yet less sweaty, corridors of political power. Ah, the Peloponnesian League, a name that sounds like an ancient soccer tournament, but was actually Sparta's not-so-secret weapon for maintaining dominance. Imagine a club where the membership fee is your autonomy. Welcome to Spartan diplomacy. The Peloponnesian League wasn't your typical mutual aid society. Formed around 550 BC, it was more of a join us or face the consequences kind of deal. This alliance was a network of city-states, each pledging to contribute soldiers to Sparta's campaigns, while Sparta promised to protect them. Well, promised might be a bit generous. Picture it more as the Godfather offering protection you can't refuse. The League's real draw. If you didn't join, you risked facing Sparta's military might. It's like being offered a choice between safety or a guaranteed bad time. Sparta sat at the helm of this alliance, steering the collective military power of the Peloponnesian League like a captain guiding a very reluctant ship. Each member state had a voice, sure, but let's be real, Sparta held the megaphone. This hierarchical structure allowed Sparta to flex its muscles without directly ruling over its allies, maintaining a facade of mutual cooperation. Consider it a masterclass in strategic coercion, where the illusion of choice was as thin as a Spartan's tunic. Now, let's talk numbers. At its peak, the league included major players like Corinth, Illes, and Tegea. The combined manpower was formidable, providing Sparta with a military reserve that could be called upon whenever things got heated, like during the famous Peloponnesian War against Athens. However, for all its power, the league wasn't exactly a bastion of stability. It was more of a house of cards, held together by Sparta's reputation and the members' fear of retribution. Which, let's face it, is a pretty solid motivator when the alternative is facing a squad of battle-hardened Spartans. The Peloponnesian League was also an economic boon for Sparta. By securing the allegiance of these city-states, Sparta could focus its resources on maintaining its military dominance rather than diversifying its economy. While other Greek city-states dabbled in commerce and culture, Sparta's policy was more akin to do one thing and do it well. And that one thing was, you guessed it, military prowess. With allies handling the pesky details of trade and economy, Sparta could double down on what it did best, being the ancient world's most feared fighting force. But here's where the irony seeps in. The League, while ostensibly a collection of allies, often left its members feeling less like partners and more like pawns in Sparta's grand chess game. The kind of arrangement where you could almost hear the collective sigh of resignation as member states nodded along, aware of the insidious Hobson's choice they faced. The League was less about mutual support and more about ensuring that when Sparta called, you answered, preferably with troops and a pleasant smile. Despite its coercive underpinnings, the Peloponnesian League was a stroke of political genius. It allowed Sparta to project power far beyond its borders without the need for direct conquest. This system of alliances kept Sparta's hands clean, at least from a diplomatic standpoint. The city-state could maintain its focus on internal stability, ensuring the Helots remained in check while presenting a united front against external threats. And here's the kicker. Despite its flaws, the League worked. For centuries, it bolstered Sparta's position as a dominant force in the Greek world, a testament to the power of strategic alliances even when they're built on coercion. Now, let's debunk another myth while we're at it. The idea that Spartans were solitary, aloof warriors, relying solely on their own might, is as flimsy as a Spartan loincloth. The Peloponnesian League proves that even the most formidable warriors understood the importance of allies. The Spartans knew that in the complex landscape of Greek politics, going it alone was a recipe for disaster. Their skill lay in balancing fear and respect, ensuring that their allies remained just loyal enough to not rock the boat. The League wasn't just a military alliance. It was a political maneuver that allowed Sparta to punch above its weight. It gave them access to resources, manpower, and strategic locations without the headaches of direct governance. This was Sparta's real genius, not the brawn of its warriors, but the brain behind its politics. A reminder that while swords might win battles, it's the strategy that wins wars. As we continue to peel back the layers of Spartan society, remember that their story is one of both power and pragmatism. The Peloponnesian League is a shining example of how Sparta mastered the art of strategic diplomacy, ensuring its place as a dominant force in ancient Greece. But don't get too comfortable, because the road to maintaining such power is as treacherous as it is fascinating. And as we'll see, the real challenge was keeping this intricate web of alliances from unraveling, a task that required more than just military might. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the intricate dance of Spartan politics and the forces that shaped the ancient world. All right, strap on your sandals and grab your shield, because we're marching straight into the heart of Spartan legend. The battlefields where history's most famous. This is Sparta moments played out. Remember, we're not just staring at Bronze Age action scenes. We're uncovering the gritty details that textbooks often gloss over. Let's start with one of the most iconic military standoffs ever, the Battle of Thermopylae. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans, led by King Leonidas, made their last stand against the Persian horde in 480 BC. Hollywood loves to paint this as a tale of heroic sacrifice, the ultimate showdown between freedom-loving Greeks and the evil empire of Xerxes. But let's peel back the layers of dramatization and see what's really going on here. First off, the numbers. It wasn't just 300 Spartans holding the line. Add about 7,000 other Greek allies to the mix, who stuck around for the first couple of days before things got a bit too hot to handle. Now, those 300 Spartans were indeed a special breed, a hand-picked elite force tasked with holding the narrow pass at Thermopylae, a natural bottleneck that was supposed to level the playing field against the numerically superior Persians. But here's the kicker. Xerxes' forces were estimated to be anywhere from 100,000 to 150,000 strong, though Herodotus, with his penchant for exaggeration, suggested a whopping 2 million. That number is about as realistic as finding Wi-Fi in ancient Sparta. In reality, it was likely an overwhelming force, but not quite the tidal wave of soldiers that some accounts claim. Now, why did Leonidas and his band of brothers decide to make a last stand here? Because it was a strategic choke point, ideal for nullifying the Persian numerical advantage. It was a bit like trying to get an elephant through a keyhole. The Greeks knew that if they could make a stand somewhere, it was here. And Leonidas, ever the pragmatist, knew that a heroic death could inspire all of Greece to unite against the invader. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Spartans and their allies held the pass for 3 days, inflicting heavy casualties on the Persians. But as with many great plans, it all went sideways thanks to betrayal. Enter Ephialtes, a Greek whose name would become synonymous with traitor, as he revealed a secret mountain path to the Persians, allowing them to flank Leonidas and his men. Faced with the inevitability of defeat, Leonidas dismissed most of the Greek forces, choosing to make a last stand with his 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans. And here's another twist. Those Thebans, they weren't exactly there by choice. They were essentially hostages to keep Thebes from siding with Persia. Talk about loyalty under duress. So, how did a catastrophic defeat at Thermopylae become a cornerstone of Spartan glory? Simple. The Spartans were masters of ancient spin. They turned a tactical retreat into a tale of valor and sacrifice. By dying heroically, Leonidas and his men ensured that Thermopylae would be remembered not as a loss, but as a rallying cry for Greek unity. Fast forward to modern day, and the Spartan stand at Thermopylae is still celebrated as an epitome of courage against overwhelming odds. It's the kind of story that appeals to our love for the underdog, the David against Goliath. But remember, the real victory was in the aftermath, a PR triumph that saw Greek city-states rally together, leading to future victories like the Battle of Salamis, where a united Greek fleet handed Xerxes a humbling naval defeat. Now, let's shift gears and talk about how the Spartans managed to build their reputation on the back of these battles. They weren't just warriors, they were storytellers, too. The Spartans had a knack for turning defeat into a narrative of indomitable spirit, a skill that would be the envy of any modern PR firm. Even when the chips were down, Spartans managed to position themselves as the epitome of bravery and self-sacrifice. This strategic storytelling wasn't just about boosting morale, it served a political purpose. By maintaining a narrative of invincibility, Sparta ensured that its allies in the Peloponnesian League remained committed to the cause. After all, who wouldn't want to be associated with the guys who supposedly never lost a fight, even when they did? Let's not forget the less glamorous aftermath of these battles. Thermopylae, for all its glory, was a tactical defeat. The Persian army marched on, burning Athens to the ground. But the real victory lay in the strength of the narrative. By the time the Persians were finally stopped at Plataea in 479 BC, the story of Thermopylae had already galvanized the Greek world. And here's where we take a leaf out of their playbook, understanding that narratives can shape reality just as much as swords can. The Spartans, with their focus on honor and legacy, knew the power of a good story. They didn't just fight battles, they crafted legends that would echo through the ages. It's a lesson in the power of perception, a reminder that sometimes the pen, or in this case, the oral tradition, can be mightier than the sword. As we delve deeper into the annals of Spartan history, keep in mind that behind every grand tale lies a complex web of truths and half-truths. The Spartans, as much as they were warriors, were also strategists in the game of perception. They understood that the true battlefield extended beyond the physical realm and into the hearts and minds of those who heard their stories. So, as we continue to explore the legacy of Sparta, remember that the legend was as much a product of storytelling as it was of warfare. And stay tuned, because the saga of Sparta is far from over, with more twists and turns just waiting to be uncovered. Now, as we steer this chariot toward the twilight of Sparta's glory days, let's drop the curtain on the myth of eternal Spartan dominance. Because, spoiler alert, even the mighty Spartans couldn't escape the gravitational pull of history's favorite plot twist, decline. Yes, folks, the same city-state that gave us the adjective Spartan to describe minimalism and toughness eventually found itself on the wrong side of prosperity and innovation, or rather, the lack thereof. First, let's talk economics. Sparta was so laser-focused on churning out soldiers that it forgot about the other little things that keep a society ticking, like trade, innovation, and not relying entirely on enslaved populations. Their economy was built on the backs of the Helots, who, let's be honest, were the real unsung heroes of Spartan society. But relying on subjugated labor as your primary economic engine is like building a sandcastle during high tide. Eventually, the waves of rebellion come crashing in. The Helots were, to put it mildly, not thrilled with their lot in life. With a population ratio that sometimes reached 7 Helots to 1 Spartan, you can imagine the tension. It's like being vastly outnumbered at a family reunion where everyone's holding a grudge. Remember that Peloponnesian League we talked about? Well, maintaining such a coalition wasn't just a matter of flexing military muscle. It required economic strength, something Athens had in spades thanks to its bustling trade and naval prowess. Sparta, on the other hand, had an economy as diverse as its diet of black broth, which is to say, not very. When the Peloponnesian War broke out, Sparta's lack of naval power and economic resources became glaringly apparent. Their great rival Athens could fund prolonged military campaigns, while Sparta had to rely on the occasional Persian handout. That's right, the proud Spartans, champions of Greek freedom, ended up as reluctant bedfellows with the very empire they once fought to repel. Oh, the irony. The social fabric of Sparta wasn't faring much better. The rigid class system and the relentless focus on military excellence left little room for social mobility or innovation. The agoge had done its job too well, producing generations of warriors, but not much else. By the time the 4th century BC rolled around, Sparta's citizen population was dwindling, partly because they seemed to have forgotten that babies are necessary to replace fallen warriors. The Spartan ethos of strength and bravery didn't exactly lend itself to family planning, and the constant wars took their toll on the male population. Combine that with the practice of infanticide for those deemed unfit, and you've got yourself a recipe for demographic disaster. And then came the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, where the Thebans, led by the brilliant tactician Epaminondas, delivered a blow that shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility. The Thebans deployed an innovative tactic called the oblique phalanx, catching the Spartans off guard and decimating their forces. It was the kind of defeat that makes you reassess your life choices. For Sparta, it meant the beginning of the end. Their military pride was wounded, and their reputation as the premier warriors of Greece was in tatters. It was like discovering your favorite rock band is just a one-hit wonder. The aftermath of Leuctra was a cascade of consequences. With their military dominance shaken, the Helots seized the opportunity for rebellion. Messenia, previously under Spartan control, broke free, stripping Sparta of a significant portion of its agricultural base. Without the Helots to till the fields, Sparta's economy faltered, leaving them more vulnerable than ever. It was a textbook example of what happens when you put all your eggs in one spear-wielding basket. Yet, despite these setbacks, the legend of Sparta endured, and here's why. Humans love a good story, and Sparta had cultivated theirs with the precision of a harp-light spear thrust. The image of the fearless Spartan warrior, standing resolute against impassable odds, is the stuff of which legends are made. The reality, though, was a society struggling to adapt to a rapidly changing world, a world where military might alone couldn't guarantee survival. But in the grand tapestry of history, the Spartans managed to weave their narrative so tightly that it became almost inseparable from the truth. The legacy of Spartan military culture continues to echo through the ages, inspiring everything from military academies to fitness programs. The Spartan ideal of discipline, endurance, and resilience resonates in a world that often romanticizes toughness over nuance. We see it in movies, where the Spartan ethos is distilled into a few catchy phrases and dramatic battle scenes. This is Sparta. Might be more Hollywood than history, but it's a testament to the enduring power of a well-crafted myth. So, what can we learn from the Spartans? Well, for starters, adaptability is as crucial as strength. Sparta's downfall was not just a result of external pressures, but an inability to evolve beyond their military-centric worldview. In today's fast-paced world, the lesson is clear. Flexing your muscles is great, but if you can't roll with the punches, you're in trouble. Moreover, it's a reminder that narratives matter. Spartans were masters of their story, shaping perceptions in ways that far outlived their actual influence. They understood that while battles are fought with swords, wars are won in the minds of people. A lesson, perhaps, as relevant today as it was in the dusty plains of ancient Greece. In wrapping up our journey through Sparta's rise and fall, let's bid farewell to a society that stood as a monument to the complexities of human ambition. Their legacy, a blend of myth and reality, serves as a poignant reminder of our fascination with strength and the stories we tell about it. So next time you hear tales of Spartan valor, remember that every legend has its roots in truth, however tangled and imperfect they may be. And with that, we leave Sparta to its place in history, a city-state that, for all its flaws, continues to captivate our imagination. In the grand, chaotic theater of medieval warfare, you wouldn't be the knight in shining armor charging into glory. Nope, you'd be the nerd behind the scenes with a penchant for geometry and a knack for constructing colossal war machines. Welcome to the gritty, underappreciated world of the medieval siege engineer, where your life is less about swinging swords and more about calculating projectile arcs and managing mud. It's a bit like being a behind-the-scenes tech wizard, but with more dirt and a constant risk of being crushed by your creations. In this grand performance of medieval siegecraft, you're not just any player. You're the one who holds the keys to the kingdom's walls, literally. Your job is not just a career. It's an economic gamble that can make or break a campaign. You see, a well-made trebuchet could mean the difference between a fortress falling or holding fast. And these bad boys didn't come cheap. A single trebuchet could cost a small fortune, sometimes equivalent to an entire year's income for a minor noble. We're talking about the medieval equivalent of dropping a few million on a high-tech missile. As for your salary, well, let's just say you're not exactly living in a drafty hovel. Siege engineers were highly valued, and with good reason. You could command a salary that would make a blacksmith blush, often earning enough to keep you in fine woolen cloaks, and perhaps even the occasional fancy feast. In an era where many were scraping by on gruel, you had the potential to live quite comfortably, provided you didn't get squished by a collapsing siege tower first. But before you start daydreaming about the cushy life of a well-paid engineer, let's talk about what it took to get here. Forget any notions of just being some muscle-bound grunt swinging a hammer. Being a siege engineer required brains, not brawn. You needed to understand the physics of tension and torsion, the mathematics of parabolic trajectories, and the structural integrity of various materials. You were more likely to be found hunched over a crude drawing, charcoal in hand, than hefting a sword. Training was rigorous and often involved apprenticeships or studying under a master engineer. It might surprise you to learn that some of the most effective engineers were actually educated priests and monks. Who better to calculate the divine arc of a trebuchet's throw than someone with a direct line to the divine? The church, after all, was one of the few places where you could get your hands on books and scrolls containing precious knowledge about geometry and physics. Now, let's bust a few myths, shall we? You might think of siege engineers as solitary figures brooding over blueprints, but in reality, you were part of a team, a medieval think tank, if you will. You worked closely with carpenters, blacksmiths, and laborers, coordinating efforts to turn your designs into reality. And let's not forget the logistical nightmare of transporting these behemoths. Imagine hauling a massive trebuchet across miles of muddy medieval terrain. It's the kind of task that would make even the most seasoned modern-day project manager break out in a cold sweat. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, your work as a siege engineer was a linchpin in the power struggles of kings and lords. When a monarch decided that a neighboring castle would look better in his collection, he turned to you. Without your expertise, all the knights and soldiers in the world wouldn't breach a well-defended fortress. You were the unsung hero. Well, maybe not a hero, but certainly the unsung genius behind the victories and defeats that shaped the medieval political landscape. So, while the knights got the songs and the poets wrote epic tales of their bravery, you were the one quietly ensuring their success, or at least their survival. It may not have been glamorous, and it certainly wasn't safe, but it was essential. And as you calculated the angle of attack for your next siege engine, you knew you were part of something much larger than yourself. You were helping to shape the destiny of kingdoms, one rock at a time. While the knights were off gallivanting into the sunset, you, the siege engineer, were the one recalibrating the trajectory of that sunset, literally. Medieval Europe wasn't just a picturesque landscape of castles and fields. It was a real-life game of risk, minus the board and dice. This was an era where sieges weren't the exception. They were the main event. Why all the castle-crashing excitement, you ask? Well, Europe was a patchwork quilt of petty kingdoms, duchies, and territories, all eager to stitch a larger piece for themselves. With constant land disputes and succession crises, it was like everyone was trying to play Monopoly, but with real estate that came with guard towers and moats. Castles were the ultimate property pieces, and if you wanted to expand your domain, you had to break a few stones, or rather, get your siege engineer to do it for you. Enter you, the medieval mastermind with a knack for turning stone walls into rubble. Your value was directly proportional to the complexity of the conflict. Castles were designed to withstand sieges, with thick walls, strategic locations, and supplies to outlast even the longest standoff. They were the medieval equivalent of a nuclear bunker. And yet, no matter how impregnable, every fortress had its Achilles heel. Your job was to find it and exploit it, preferably before the enemy found yours. You see, the medieval battlefield was a place where ingenuity could trump brute force. Sure, knights in shining armor were impressive, but even the most valiant charge would falter against a solid stone wall. That's where you came in, with your trebuchets and battering rams, your siege towers and sappers. You turned the tide of battles, not with the swing of a sword, but with the arc of a stone. Let's take a closer look at the siege of Caravan in 1183, a perfect example of siege engineering at its finest. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was a full-blown medieval drama. The castle of Caravan, nestled in what is now Jordan, was a fortress of significant strategic importance during the Crusades. Its walls were the stuff of legend, thick enough to withstand regular assaults. But then came Reynold de Chatelain, a man whose ambition was as unyielding as his armor. His castle was a thorn in Saladin's side, and just like that, a siege was born. Saladin knew that a direct assault would be suicidal. Instead, he put his faith in his siege engineers, folks like you, who were tasked with crafting a plan to take down the fortress. The engineers devised a multi-pronged attack strategy. They constructed massive siege towers, towering over the walls like medieval skyscrapers, and trebuchets that hurled boulders with the force of 1,000 angry landlords. The key was timing and precision, elements that were as crucial in medieval sieges as they are in Swiss watchmaking. Each component of the siege had to work in harmony, the towers advancing just as the trebuchets launched their payloads, creating a symphony of destruction that would make any conductor proud. And while the knights charged and the archers loosed their volleys, it was your calculations that orchestrated the crescendo. But here's the kicker. Despite the engineers' best efforts, Saladin didn't capture Caravan during this siege. The defenders held out, thanks in part to their own clever tactics and perhaps a bit of luck. The siege was lifted, but the lessons learned were invaluable. Sieges were not just battles of strength, but battles of wits, and the engineers were the grandmasters of this lethal chess game. The political theater of medieval Europe meant that these sieges weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger narrative, a clash of cultures and religions, ambitions and alliances. Each siege was a microcosm of the political landscape, where the engineer's role was as much about strategy as it was about engineering. You were a bridge between the tactical and the technical, conduit through which the fortunes of kingdoms flowed. Economically, sieges were a double-edged sword. For the besiegers, the cost was astronomical. Constructing and maintaining siege equipment, paying the engineers, and feeding the army could drain a treasury faster than you could say, tax hike. For the defenders, a successful siege could mean the difference between prosperity and poverty. A fallen fortress often led to plunder and pillage, turning a thriving town into a ghostly ruin. In this high-stakes game, a siege engineer like you was worth your weight in gold. Literally. Your skills could decide whether a king's coffers would overflow or run dry. And while the knights got the glory, you got the satisfaction of knowing you were the true architect of victory. Your name might not have been sung by bards, but your legacy was etched in the stones of the castles you conquered or defended. And so, as you plotted your next engineering marvel, you understood the gravity of your role. You were shaping history, one siege at a time, in a world where the only constant was change. The political and social dynamics of medieval Europe were as complex as the gears of a clock, and you were one of the few who understood how to make it tick. With each battle, each siege, you were not just building machines, you were building the future. So, when you were crafting the future one trebuchet at a time, what exactly were you working with? Let's dive into the iconic tools of your trade, the siege machines. First up, the trebuchet, the rock star of medieval artillery. This isn't just your garden variety catapult. No, the trebuchet was the heavyweight champion of siege warfare, a machine of such elegant brutality that it could launch projectiles weighing over 300 pounds. Forget lobbing pebbles. We're talking boulders the size of a small car, flying through the air with the grace of a swan and the impact of a freight train. The mechanics behind this beast were as mesmerizing as its destructive power. The trebuchet relied on a counterweight system. Imagine a massive arm punched into the air by a weight on one end, up to 10 tons in some cases. This was medieval physics at its finest. The sling would whip around, releasing its payload at the perfect moment, a testament to the precision required. If you've ever tried launching a watermelon with a slingshot and ended up with more mess than launch, you'll appreciate the finesse involved here. But in Hollywood, the trebuchet is often depicted as a quick and dirty solution, like a medieval Hail Mary pass. In reality, constructing one was a massive undertaking. Depending on the size, it could take weeks to build and required skilled carpenters and blacksmiths to execute the design. The trebuchet wasn't just about brute force. It was a masterpiece of engineering, needing adjustments for wind, weight, and angle, because physics doesn't take a day off, even in the Middle Ages. Then there's the battering ram, the medieval equivalent of a door-to-door salesman who won't take no for an answer. The simplest form was just a big log, but the more sophisticated versions were housed in a wooden frame on wheels, covered with wet hides to fend off fire arrows. Imagine a giant medieval hamster in its wheel, except this wheel was aimed at your front door and had no intention of rolling over. These rams were more than just brute force. They were precisely aimed instruments of destruction. A well-placed strike could bring down a gate faster than you can say, "Open sesame." And if you think one ram was enough, think again. In major sieges, several could be used simultaneously to apply pressure on different parts of a fortress's defenses, a strategy that required coordination and timing. Meanwhile, the siege tower was your ticket to reaching new heights, literally. These mobile fortresses were several stories tall, brimming with armed soldiers ready to pour over the battlements like a medieval flash mob. Their construction was a balancing act, sturdy enough to withstand attacks, yet light enough to be wheeled into place. The largest towers could reach up to 60 feet in height and required a small army to push them into position. This was medieval urban planning on the fly, a pop-up war machine that transformed battlefields into construction sites. So why the discrepancy between these mechanical marvels and their portrayal in films? Well, chaos sells tickets. The Hollywood version of a siege is a frenetic spectacle, where boulders fly on a whim and towers fall with a dramatic crash. In reality, these operations were slow, methodical, and often mind-numbingly tedious. It was a war of attrition, patience, and precision, a far cry from the adrenaline-pumping scenes on the silver screen. Beyond the thrill of destruction, siege machines were also a test of economic endurance. Building and maintaining these behemoths required substantial resources. A single siege tower could cost as much as 100 pounds of silver, a king's ransom in the Middle Ages. For a kingdom, this was a serious investment, like buying a fleet of luxury cars with the hope they'd pay off in the form of new territories. But if the siege failed, it was a financial sinkhole, draining coffers and demoralizing troops. The political ramifications were equally significant. A successful siege could shift power balances, redrawing territorial lines and altering the course of history. It was the ultimate high-stakes game, with siege engineers like you as the star players orchestrating the moves. Your machines weren't just tools of war. They were instruments of diplomacy, negotiation, and sometimes sheer intimidation. Yet, in the grand tapestry of medieval warfare, there remains something incredibly human about the siege, from the meticulous planning to the raw determination of those involved. It's a reminder that while the tools and techniques have changed, the fundamental nature of conflict, strategy, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of advantage remains much the same. So, as you stand amidst the cranking gears and swinging counterweights, remember that you're not just engineering destruction. You're crafting history, wielding the power to topple empires and build legacies, one stone at a time. This isn't just a job, it's your contribution to the annals of time. And with every siege, every fortress laid bare, you etch your mark on the world, proving that sometimes the pen isn't mightier than the sword. It's the lever, the fulcrum, and the counterweight that truly rule the day. As the dust settles and the machines fall silent, you know there are more castles to conquer and more stories to tell. Each siege is a chapter, each machine a footnote in the grand narrative of medieval warfare. And as long as there are walls to breach and kingdoms to claim, the siege engineer will remain at the heart of the action, ever calculating, ever building, ever shaping the world with every turn of the wheel and swing of the arm. And as the echoes of clashing steel and crumbling stone fade, let's step away from the dusty battlefield and peek into the tent of the siege engineer, your home away from home. It's here, amidst the scattered parchments and hastily scribbled calculations, that we uncover the beating heart of the medieval war machine, the life of the engineer himself. Far from the glamour of knightly tales, this life was a mix of high stakes, calculated risks, and a bit of domestic juggling. Sure, you might be the unsung hero of the battlefield, but back in the village, you were just another guy trying to keep the peace with a spouse who wasn't too thrilled about your travel schedule. Imagine explaining to your partner why you'll miss another harvest festival because, well, there's a castle that needs toppling. Not exactly the kind of romantic dinner conversation you'd want, right? For siege engineers, the job wasn't just about the thrill of seeing a fortress fall. It was about securing a future for their families, with the potential to earn a salary that could rival a minor noble's income. Sometimes up to £50 of silver for a successful campaign. You'd think they were living on Easy Street, but the reality was more complicated. You see, with great power comes great responsibility, and also often a target on your back. The societal perception of siege engineers was a mixed bag. On one hand, you were the genius who could bring down walls that seemed as immovable as mountains. On the other, some folks saw you as a necessary evil, a dark wizard of destruction, if you will. In some letters and records, engineers are depicted as crafty thinkers, revered for their intellect and skills. Yet in others, they are reviled as agents of chaos, mercenaries who would sell their talents to the highest bidder regardless of the moral implications. And then there were the ambitions. Oh, the ambitions. Imagine you're a young engineer, fresh from an apprenticeship, eager to make your mark. The dream, to design the ultimate siege machine, one that would be whispered about in taverns long after you're gone. Maybe you'd even get a castle named after you. An engineer can dream, right? But ambition was a double-edged sword. The more you achieved, the more you were expected to deliver. One wrong calculation, one failed siege, and your reputation could crumble faster than a breached wall. Take the case of James of St. George, the famed master mason and engineer who worked under King Edward I of England. His legacy, building the castles of North Wales, including the mighty Caernarfon Castle. Yet, despite his monumental achievements, his letters reveal a man constantly under pressure, juggling the logistics of construction with the demands of royal expectations. It's like being the lead architect on a skyscraper while dealing with a client who wants it done yesterday. And let's not forget the fear factor. When your job involves constructing massive machines designed to break things, there's bound to be a little anxiety. The looming threat of failure wasn't just a professional concern, it was a personal one. A botched siege could mean not only the loss of your job, but also your head. Talk about a high-pressure work environment. In the eyes of some soldiers and citizens, you were a magician, a creator of marvels. But to others, you were the harbinger of doom, the one who turned their favorite hideaway into a pile of rubble. It was a tightrope walk of public opinion, and the stakes were as high as the towers you built. But let's talk about motivation. Why did they do it? Why endure the stress, the long separations from family, the societal disdain? In part, it was the thrill of intellectual challenge, a chance to pit wits against stone and mortar, to devise the perfect siege plan. There was also the promise of legacy. To have your designs remembered, to know that future engineers might study your work, was a powerful incentive. However, the motivations weren't always so lofty. Sometimes it was simply about survival. Medieval life wasn't exactly a picnic, and having a skill that could provide for your family was nothing to sneeze at. The job offered stability in an unpredictable world, and for many, that was worth its weight in gold or silver, as the case may be. And then there were the letters. Ah, the letters. As revealing as they are poignant, these missives offer a glimpse into the minds of the engineers. From pleas for more resources to personal notes sent home, they reflect a life lived on the edge. One letter from an engineer to his wife might read like a love letter, filled with longing and promises of return, while another to a noble might be a carefully worded request for more funding, lest the siege fail. Yet, despite the complexities and contradictions, siege engineers were undeniably integral to the medieval world. Without them, the castles of Europe might still stand unchallenged, relics of an unbroken past. They were the architects of change, the craftsmen of chaos, and the unsung heroes of history's great sieges. So, as you plot your next engineering marvel, remember that you're not just battling stone and mortar. You're navigating a labyrinth of social expectations, personal ambitions, and the ever-present spectre of failure. It's a world where the lines between hero and villain blur, where the true measure of success isn't just a toppled wall, but a legacy built on ingenuity and resilience. As the siege engineer, you're the linchpin in the power plays of kings and the dreams of families. You're the one who turns the tide of battle with a single calculation, the one whose work echoes through the annals of time. And as the sun sets on another day of planning and plotting, you know that each siege is more than just a battle. It's a testament to the indomitable human spirit, the drive to build, to conquer, and to endure. So here you are, standing at the precipice of legacy, peering into the murky depths of how siege engineers have been remembered, or more often forgotten, by history. It's a bit like being the bass player in a rock band, crucial to the sound, but rarely the one signing autographs. The knights and kings got the spotlight, strutting their stuff in tales spun by poets and bards, while siege engineers were the ones doing the heavy lifting, literally and metaphorically. You might wonder, why this historical amnesia? Well, the romance of a knight in shining armor charging into battle, lance at the ready, is a lot sexier than a guy hunched over blueprints, muttering about fulcrums and counterweights. Knights were the Instagram influencers of their day, while you were the tech nerds, making sure their Wi-Fi was running smoothly. Yet, it's your ingenuity that marks the true beginning of modern engineering and military tactics. Take the trebuchet, for example. This wasn't just a stone-flinging contraption. It was a precursor to the principles behind modern ballistics. The precise calculations of weight, angle, and distance laid the groundwork for the artillery cannons that would later dominate battlefields. It's like the trebuchet was the grandfather clock to today's smartwatch. Same basic principles, just more gears and a touchscreen. Let's not forget about the logistics involved in moving these medieval monstrosities. Siege engineers were early logisticians, the unsung heroes who could organize the transport of massive siege equipment across hostile terrain. This was before FedEx could overnight your parcels. Mind you, planning and executing a siege was akin to orchestrating a military symphony where timing and precision were everything. It's no stretch to say that their strategies laid the foundation for modern military operations, where coordination is key. And then there's the matter of fortifications. The very walls you were toppling inspired innovations in defense. As siege technology advanced, so did the architecture of castles, evolving from simple keeps to complex fortresses with multiple lines of defense. This arms race between offense and defense spurred advances in civil engineering, influencing the design of cities and military bases for centuries to come. Your work was less about destruction and more about evolution, pushing the envelope of what was possible in architecture and warfare. Yet, despite these contributions, siege engineers remain shadowy figures in historical narratives. Why? Well, part of it is the nature of their work. They were mercenaries of sorts, often hired hands who flitted from conflict to conflict, leaving few lasting personal legacies. They were the ultimate freelancers, and like many freelancers today, they didn't always get the credit they deserved. Consider James of St. George again. Despite his massive contributions to the castles of North Wales, his name is not one you'd find etched in history books right next to Richard the Lionheart. Yet, his work endures, his castles still standing as testament to his genius. It's a reminder that fame and recognition are fickle beasts, often more interested in flashy exploits than enduring contributions. So, what can we learn from the overlooked legacy of siege engineers? For one, it's a testament to the power of quiet competence. In a world obsessed with instant gratification and viral fame, there's something profoundly humbling about the idea that true impact often happens behind the scenes. It's the engineers, not the warriors, who ultimately shape the future, whether by building bridges or breaching walls. Moreover, their story is a reminder of the importance of adaptability. Siege engineers had to be innovative, thinking on their feet, and constantly adapting to new challenges. In a rapidly changing world, their ability to pivot and problem solve is an invaluable lesson. After all, life itself is a series of sieges, some planned, others unexpected, and it's those who can adapt who ultimately succeed. Finally, the legacy of siege engineers is a call to appreciate the unsung heroes in our own lives, those who toil in the background, ensuring the gears of our world keep turning, deserve recognition. Whether it's the IT specialist who saves your presentation from the brink of disaster, or the teacher who quietly inspires the next generation, their contributions are as vital as any knight's charge. So, as you wrap up this exploration of the siege engineer's life, consider the broader tapestry of history. It's woven from the threads of countless individuals, each with their own unique contribution. And while not every thread is golden, each is essential to the integrity of the whole. In the grand narrative of history, it's the cumulative efforts of the many, not the few, that propel us forward. In the end, the life of a siege engineer is a study in contrasts, between anonymity and legacy, destruction and creation, chaos and precision. It's a reflection of the enduring human spirit, the drive to innovate, to overcome, and to leave a mark, no matter how small, on the vast canvas of history. As you ponder their legacy, remember that while they may not have been the stars of their own tales, their story is one of quiet triumph. A reminder that sometimes the most profound echoes are those that resonate long after the last stone has fallen. You find yourself in ancient China, where the air is thick with ambition, and the land is as fractured as a jigsaw puzzle that's missing a few crucial pieces. Welcome to the Qin Dynasty's rise, a time when Qin Shi Huang wasn't just playing king, he was rewriting the rulebook with more gusto than a reality TV show. So, how do you unify a country that's been more divided than a room full of cat lovers and dog enthusiasts? Well, if you're Qin Shi Huang, the first thing you do is lean heavily on legalism, the ancient version of my way or the highway. It's the late 3rd century BCE, and China's not quite the sprawling powerhouse we know today. It's a patchwork quilt of warring states that have been bickering for centuries, each one convinced it's the next big deal. Enter Qin Shi Huang, a ruler with a vision broader than the Great Wall itself, which, spoiler alert, he also had a hand in building. The man was nothing if not ambitious. He envisioned a centralized government. Think of it like the world's first attempt at a supercharged power grab, all in the name of unity. Why legalism? Well, in a world where chaos was the norm, Qin Shi Huang's team decided that humans were more inclined to mischief than good deeds. Legalism, with its strict laws and harsher punishments, seemed like the antidote to centuries of squabbling. It wasn't about winning hearts and minds. It was about keeping them in line. We're talking laws so strict that if you so much as sneezed in the wrong direction, you might find yourself in a spot of trouble. And by trouble, I mean possibly losing your head, or worse. Let's talk numbers for a second. Qin Shi Huang's regime wasn't just about flexing muscles. It was about rigorous administration. The Qin state dispatched around 120,000 military households to strategic locations to maintain the order. In today's terms, that's like sending the entire population of a small city to enforce peace. The message was clear. The Qin dynasty meant business, and it wasn't afraid to show it. The economic landscape of Qin was as much a battlefield as the territories they sought to control. The state's economy was centralized under standardized weights and measures, a single currency, and even a unified writing script. Imagine trying to trade with your neighbor when everyone's measuring with different-sized cups. It was a logistical nightmare that could frustrate even the most patient trader. So, standardized systems were not just practical, they were revolutionary. And let's not forget the roads. Over 4,000 miles of them crisscrossing the empire, making it easier to move troops, goods, and quite frankly, gossip. What about the people, you ask? Well, they were getting the short end of the stick, quite literally. Forced labor was the name of the game, and the Great Wall wasn't going to build itself. Taxes were high, the workload was grueling, and the sense of liberty was about as real as a mirage in the go-by desert. Yet this was the price for unity, for a China that would, under Qin Shi Huang's iron rule, finally be one. It's easy to romanticize Qin Shi Huang as the unifier of China, the visionary who saw a future others couldn't. But let's not forget the other side of the coin. This was a man who buried scholars alive for disagreeing with him and burned books that didn't fit his narrative. The guy was basically the original cancel culture, but with a lot more fire and brimstone. The Qin dynasty's legal system was something else. Forget about innocent until proven guilty. It was more like guilty until you prove you're not, and good luck with that. The punishments were not just harsh, they were downright terrifying. There was a 5-punishment system that included tattooing, cutting off the nose, amputation of the feet, castration, and the death penalty. No one was getting off with a slap on the wrist. And yet, for all its brutality and iron-fisted control, the Qin dynasty laid the groundwork for a unified China, a feat that had eluded rulers for centuries. They ended the warring states period, brought about a centralized state, and set the stage for future dynasties. Qin Shi Huang's reign was short, just 15 years, but its impact was monumental. The idea of a single China, governed by one set of rules, was his legacy. So here you are, living in a world where one man's vision for unity is your daily reality, complete with all its harshness and order. Tomorrow holds uncertainty, but for now, you understand that you're part of something bigger, a grand experiment in governance that, despite its flaws, will shape the future of a civilization. As you lay your head to rest, ponder the paradox of power and unity, and how sometimes history's greatest achievements come wrapped in its darkest moments. The Qin dynasty's world is a cocktail of contradictions, a place where vision meets vertigo. You're caught between the grandeur of a united China and the grim reality of a regime that wields power like a sledgehammer. The laws here aren't just written in stone, they're carved there with a chisel and a sneer. Let's dive into the Qin's infamous legal system, a place where justice was more about theater than fairness. The 5 punishments were the headline act. Imagine them as the ancient world's answer to Scared Straight, but with a lot more blood. Tattooing was the mildest of the lot, leaving you permanently marked as a lawbreaker, your skin becoming a canvas for your crimes. Next up, the charming practice of cutting off noses. A nose for a nose. Not quite the saying, but you get the picture. Lose a foot, and you might as well lose your livelihood. Amputation wasn't just about pain. It was about stripping away your ability to contribute to society, literally and figuratively cutting you off at the knee. Castration was another cheery option, ensuring your family line ended with you. And if all else failed, there was always the death penalty, the ultimate full stop. These weren't punishments, they were deterrents with a side of spectacle. Think of them as the Qin dynasty's version of a warning label. Disobey, and this could be you. But why such brutality? Well, in a realm where control was king, fear was the currency. The Qin legal system wasn't interested in rehabilitation or redemption. No, it was about making sure everyone knew the cost of stepping out of line. It was like hanging a "Don't Touch" sign on a live wire, except the penalties were a bit more permanent. Numbers tell a chilling story. Over 700,000 laborers were reportedly involved in state projects, including the Great Wall and the Emperor's infamous tomb. That's more than the population of modern-day Luxembourg, all toiling under the watchful eye of an empire that saw them as disposable cogs in its grand machine. These workers weren't volunteers. They were often conscripts, forced into labor that made a 9-to-5 grind look like a 5-star spa day. And about that Great Wall, romanticized as a symbol of Chinese strength and resilience. Yes, it was a marvel of engineering, a testament to human endeavor. But let's not sugarcoat it. The wall was built on the backs of those who had no choice in the matter. Estimates suggest hundreds of thousands perished during its construction, their bones becoming part of the foundation. It's a sobering thought, a monument to protection, built by those who couldn't protect themselves. The economic context of this era was as unforgiving as its laws. Taxes were steep, and the fines for infractions could be crippling. Misplace a grain of rice, and you might find yourself owing more than your annual income. It's like getting a parking ticket that costs as much as your car. The kin state was meticulous in its record-keeping, ensuring that every last ounce of productivity was squeezed from its subjects. Forget about a safety net. This was an economic trapeze act without a harness. Now, let's bust some myths. The idea of the Great Wall as a noble endeavor is alluring, sure. Picture it, a vast, unyielding structure standing against the barbarian hordes. But the truth is murkier. It was more about keeping the empire's own house in order, managing the flow of people and goods. The wall was a barrier, yes, but also a boundary, a way to control and contain. It was less about glory and more about gritty pragmatism. And what about the man at the center of it all, Qin Shi Huang? His vision was undeniable, but it came at a cost. His policies were as relentless as they were revolutionary. The emperor wasn't just building a dynasty. He was constructing a legacy, one stone, one law, one punishment at a time. He may have united the warring states, but he did so with a fist of iron and a heart of steel. Yet, despite, or perhaps because of, its harshness, the Qin dynasty set the stage for something greater. It was a crucible, a fiery test of unity and endurance. The Qin era was a short chapter, but it was a pivotal one, showing that sometimes history's greatest leaps come from its darkest depths. As you ponder the Qin's legacy, remember that behind every law, every punishment, every stone in the wall, there were people, real, living, breathing individuals caught in the whirlwind of an empire's ambition. Stick around, because there's more to unpack. The Qin dynasty might have been a short-lived flash in the pan, but its embers burned long enough to ignite the future. The story doesn't end here. It evolves, with twists and turns as unpredictable as the Yellow River. So, as we journey forward, keep your eyes open and your mind ready. There's a lot more history to unravel, and we're just getting started. So, as we press on through the labyrinthine corridors of the Qin dynasty's history, let's shine a light on its propaganda machine. Think of it as the ancient world's answer to a 24/7 news cycle, with a lot more bamboo slips and a lot less fact-checking. The Qin's approach to controlling the narrative was as comprehensive as it was ruthless, and it all started with an act so infamous it makes Fahrenheit 451 look like a bedtime story, the burning of books. In 213 BCE, Qin Shi Huang, our favorite authoritarian visionary, decided that certain texts were a bit too subversive for his taste. So, what's an emperor to do? Simple, torch the lot of them. History, philosophy, poetry. If it didn't toe the party line, it was fuel for the fire. Now, you might think this sounds a tad draconian, but in the emperor's eyes, it was about consolidating ideological control. After all, knowledge is power, but sometimes ignorance is more convenient. This wasn't just any old bonfire. We're talking an empire-wide initiative that saw thousands of texts go up in flames. The aim: to erase the past and write a new future, one where the Qin's narrative was the only narrative. It's like hitting the reset button on a civilization's collective memory, hoping that, when the dust settled, people would only remember what you wanted them to. Modern-day spin doctors, eat your heart out. But hold on, it gets darker. Book burning was just the opening act. Enter the scholars, the keepers of wisdom, and unfortunately for them, dissent. Qin Shi Huang wasn't one for debate, so what's a ruler to do when faced with pesky intellectuals who dare question the status quo? Bury them alive, obviously. Legend has it that hundreds of scholars who challenged the Qin's policies met this grim fate. It was a chilling message. Criticize the regime, and you'll end up 6 feet under, literally. You might wonder why people would buy into such a brutal regime, but here's where the Qin's real genius lay. Fear wasn't just a tool. It was an art form. By controlling what people read and heard, the Qin dynasty crafted a narrative of inevitability. The message was clear. Resistance is futile. And in a land where survival often hinged on staying on the emperor's good side, many complied. Better to live under a harsh regime than not at all. Now, let's pivot to another obsession of our first emperor, immortality. The eternal quest to cheat death. It's a tale as old as time, and Qin Shi Huang was all in. His fixation on living forever was both a driving force and a fatal flaw. The emperor sought elixirs of life, sending expeditions far and wide in search of that elusive fountain of youth. Spoiler alert, they didn't find it, but the hunt for immortality drove innovation, exploration, and paradoxically, his own downfall. You see, the pursuit of eternal life was expensive. The coffers of the Qin state were drained by these fruitless quests and extravagant projects like the construction of his sprawling tomb, guarded by that famous terracotta army. It was a logistical marvel, employing over 700,000 workers, but it was also a testament to the emperor's ego. He was building not just for this life, but for the next, an eternal empire in miniature, complete with rivers of mercury and clay soldiers frozen in time. Here's the irony. While Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with immortality, his policies ensured the dynasty's swift demise. The emperor died in 210 BCE, allegedly from ingesting mercury pills, ironically intended to grant him eternal life. It was the ultimate punchline to a cosmic joke, a reminder that hubris is often history's greatest teacher. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. The Qin dynasty's impact, albeit short-lived, set the stage for future generations. Its propaganda machine, though brutal, was pioneering. In controlling the narrative, the Qin dynasty showed that power isn't just about military might, it's about shaping the story. And as we know, whoever controls the narrative often controls the world. So, as we wrap up this chapter, ponder this. In the grand tapestry of history, the Qin dynasty was both a cautionary tale and a blueprint for governance. Its obsession with control, both over the people and over time itself, left an indelible mark on China's psyche. And while Qin Shi Huang's terracotta warriors stand guard over his tomb, silent witnesses to a bygone era, the echoes of his regime resonate through the ages, a reminder of the power and peril of ambition unchecked. Stay tuned, because the story of China doesn't end here. The seeds of the Qin's rise and fall would sprout into new dynasties, each learning from its predecessors' triumphs and mistakes. As we move forward, we'll delve deeper into the legacy left behind and explore how the echoes of the Qin dynasty reverberated through time, shaping a civilization that continues to captivate the world. So, keep your curiosity piqued and your mind open. There's a lot more history to unravel, and the journey is far from over. As we stand on the precipice of the Qin dynasty's unraveling, let's take a closer look at the empire's Achilles heel, a self-inflicted wound that no amount of book burning or wall building could heal. The Qin dynasty, for all its innovations and iron-fisted control, was sitting on a powder keg of economic strain and social unrest. You see, even the most formidable empires are only as strong as the people who support them, and in the case of the Qin, the support was starting to buckle under the weight of its own ambition. Imagine this. You're a farmer in the Qin dynasty, living in the shadow of massive public works like the Great Wall and the Emperor's sprawling tomb. These aren't just architectural marvels. They're massive money pits. And guess who gets to foot the bill? That's right, you and your fellow peasants. Taxes were as high as a kite in a windstorm, swallowing up to 2/3 of your harvest. It's a classic case of robbing Peter to pay Paul, except Peter's also expected to build the wall, fight in the army, and somehow keep his family fed. The Qin's approach to taxation was about as subtle as a bull in a china shop. If you think filing taxes today is a headache, try doing it when a misstep could land you in forced labor or worse. The government didn't just want a slice of the pie, it wanted the whole bakery. This relentless demand for resources was driven by the state's insatiable appetite for grand projects and military campaigns. It was like trying to fill a bottomless pit with a teaspoon, and people were understandably miffed. Speaking of military campaigns, let's not forget about conscription. The Qin military machine was formidable, but it was also a voracious beast that needed constant feeding. Men were plucked from their fields and thrust into the chaos of battle, often never to return. The empire's borders might have been expanding, but its heartland was bleeding dry. Families were left without breadwinners, fields went untended, and communities slowly crumbled under the pressure. It's the kind of homecoming no one's lining up to celebrate. But wait, there's more. Alongside the oppressive taxes and mandatory military service, there was the delightful practice of forced labor. Building wonders like the Great Wall wasn't a weekend DIY project. It was a brutal, years-long endeavor that consumed lives at an alarming rate. We're talking hundreds of thousands of laborers, many of whom were worked to death. It was less a labor force and more a labor farce, where the only retirement plan was a premature grave. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The very laws designed to keep everyone in line were starting to backfire. The kin's legal code was as intricate as a spider's web and just as sticky. It was all well and good when the populace was cowed into submission, but as the strain increased, so did the resentment. The people were no longer just grumbling about heavy-handed justice. They were starting to see these laws as chains that needed breaking. Enter the seeds of rebellion. The centralized control that Qin Shi Huang so meticulously crafted was cracking under the pressure of its own rigidity. The people were fed up, and the emperor's successors weren't exactly cut from the same tyrannical cloth. Without the iron will of Qin Shi Huang to hold it all together, the dynasty's foundations began to shift like sand in a storm. It was a classic case of be careful what you wish for. A united China, yes, but at what cost? The people's discontent was a slow burn, but like all good fires, it eventually found its fuel. The harsh penalties and oppressive taxes that once kept the population in check were now fanning the flames of revolt. You can only push people so far before they start pushing back, and push they did. Rebellion wasn't just brewing, it was boiling over, and the emperor's death only turned up the heat. Let's bust a myth while we're at it. We often romanticize rebellion as a noble fight for freedom, but in reality, it's born of desperation. The Qin dynasty's downfall wasn't a swift, glorious overthrow. It was a chaotic scramble for survival. The rebels weren't knights in shining armor. They were farmers with pitchforks, fighting for their families and their future. It's a gritty reminder that history's revolutions are rarely as glamorous as we like to remember. The economic strain and social unrest were like termites gnawing away at the empire's foundations, and the cracks were starting to show. The Qin dynasty had built an empire on the backs of its people, but in the end, it forgot that even the strongest chains can be broken when enough people pull together. The rigid structure that once seemed invincible was now as brittle as a clay soldier left out in the rain. So, as we delve deeper into the Qin's demise, remember that it wasn't just the grandeur of a united China that fell. It was the weight of its own ambition. The story of the Qin dynasty is one of great heights and greater falls, of dreams that soared too close to the sun and were burned by their own brilliance. Stay tuned, because the echoes of this collapse will resonate through the ages, shaping the rise of new dynasties and the future of a nation. The journey's far from over, and there's still much to learn from the lessons of an empire that reached for the stars and came crashing back to earth. As the embers of rebellion flicker into flames, the Qin dynasty's once unyielding walls start to crumble. And wouldn't you know it, the end comes as swiftly as a plot twist in a binge-worthy drama series. So here we are, at the twilight of Qin's reign, a time when the empire's own draconian tactics come back to haunt it. Remember those heavy taxes and forced labor that were all the rage? Turns out, they're not the best way to win a popularity contest. The fall of the Qin dynasty is a masterclass in how not to manage an empire. In 207 BCE, just 15 years after Qin Shi Huang's death, the dynasty collapses like a house of cards caught in a gale. It's not just a case of bad luck. It's bad management with a side of public outrage. When your citizens are more afraid of your government than invaders, you've got a recipe for revolt. The rebellion is spearheaded by Liu Bang and Xiang Yu, two leaders who would rather take their chances with pitchforks than continue under the Qin's oppressive thumb. Xian, the vibrant heart of the Qin Empire, becomes ground zero for chaos. The capital, once the seat of power, now witnesses the frantic exodus of the Qin forces. The people, tired of living in a state of near-constant fear, rise up. It's a grassroots movement if ever there was one, proving that when the oppressed get organized, even the mightiest walls can't hold back the tide. In a delicious twist of irony, the very systems that kept the Qin's hands wrapped tightly around the empire's throat now unravel it. The military, stretched thin by constant campaigns and internal strife, can't hold the line. All that centralized power and efficiency. It's as useful as a chocolate teapot when the people decide enough is enough. Liu Bang, a former peasant, emerges as a key figure in the revolt, eventually founding the Han Dynasty. Talk about an underdog story. The lessons of the Qin dynasty's rapid rise and fall are as relevant now as they were over 2 millennia ago. For starters, the balance between strict control and public freedom is like walking a tightrope in a hurricane. Go too far in either direction, and you're bound to fall. The Qin's downfall teaches us that power is as much about persuasion as it is about enforcement. Sure, you can rule with an iron fist, but don't be surprised when that fist becomes a target. And what of the Qin's legal system, that blueprint for brutality? It leaves a legacy more enduring than the Emperor's own terracotta army. Future dynasties, while not as harsh, take notes on Qin's centralized administration and standardized systems. The Han Dynasty, for instance, adopts and adapts many of the Qin's policies, proving that even in failure, there's a blueprint for success. It's a bit like finding a winning lottery ticket in a trash can. The Qin experience is a cautionary tale about the cost of power. It's a reminder that when you squeeze too hard, the very thing you seek to control slips through your fingers. Qin Shi Huang's vision of a unified China was ahead of its time, but his methods were a few centuries behind. The dynasty's demise shows that fear is a fickle foundation for an empire as likely to crack as to hold firm. In modern governance, the echoes of Qin's approach still resonate. The balance between state control and individual freedom remains a tightrope act, one that governments worldwide continue to navigate. Whether it's surveillance in the digital age or the debate over personal liberties, the questions the Qin dynasty raises are as relevant today as they were back then. History, it seems, is a mirror that reflects our own struggles and aspirations. So, as we close this chapter on the Qin dynasty, let's appreciate the complexity of its legacy. Sure, it was a brutal regime, but it built the groundwork for a unified China. Its laws were harsh, yet they laid the foundation for future legal systems. It's a paradox of power. The Qin's greatest weaknesses were also its greatest strengths, a reminder that history is rarely black and white. And there you have it, a whirlwind tour through the rise and fall of one of history's most formidable dynasties. The Qin dynasty's story is one of ambition and hubris, of innovation and oppression. It's a saga that reminds us that the past is never truly past. It's a constant companion, whispering lessons, if only we choose to listen. With that, let us step back from the ancient dust of the Qin dynasty and consider how its story might illuminate our own lives. When you find yourself grappling with bureaucracy or questioning authority, remember that you're part of a long tradition. The dance between order and chaos, freedom and control, is as old as civilization itself. It's a story that's still being written, with each of us playing a part. So next time you gaze at a map of China or hear the distant echoes of history, think of the Qin dynasty. Think of the walls they built, the laws they enacted, and the legacy they left behind. And remember, in the grand sweep of history, we are all architects of our own empires, however small they may be. The rise and fall of the Qin dynasty serves as a timeless reminder that while power fades, the lessons it imparts endure through the ages. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers carved out a land as fertile as it was turbulent, you find yourself navigating the bustling streets of Babylon. It's the early 18th century BCE, and you're smack dab in the middle of a civilization that's as complex as the ziggurats towering over the city. Here, amidst the clamor of traders and the whispers of scribes, lies something extraordinary. An intricate legal system etched into stone, known famously as the Code of Hammurabi. Now, don't be swayed by the romantic notion of old Hammurabi as some ancient Atticus Finch. Spoiler alert, this isn't about justice in the way you might hope. Hammurabi, the sixth king of the first Babylonian dynasty, crafted this legal masterpiece, or perhaps patchwork quilt, to govern a growing empire. Picture 282 laws, each a little chiseled line in cuneiform on a massive stone stele, standing like an ancient billboard advertising not goods, but governance. And while you might expect this code to be the ancient world's answer to law and order, it was more about keeping the economy in check and maintaining the king's power than anything else. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty. Say you've had a rowdy night out, and in a moment of less than great judgment, you break someone's bone. Hammurabi lays down the law with a penalty of 30 shekels. That's not pocket change, folks. Back then, it could buy you a pretty decent flock of sheep. This wasn't just about retribution. It was economic regulation. The fine wasn't random. It It was calculated to maintain social order and economic stability. You see, in Babylon, the law was a tool for balancing books as much as balancing scales. This legal framework wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers, but also about controlling the Babylonian marketplace. Hammurabi's code meticulously outlined everything from the price of a day's work to the cost of renting an ox. If you were a builder and your shoddy construction led to a collapse, you'd better have life insurance, because the code demanded your life as restitution. Harsh, absolutely, but it underscored the importance of reliability in trades and professions, a medieval Better Business Bureau with a much sharper edge. It's tempting to paint this system as draconian, and sure, parts of it were, but it's not all doom and gloom. Consider this. The Code of Hammurabi was one of the earliest attempts to create a comprehensive legal system, covering everything from theft to marriage, and even medical malpractice. It was a pioneering effort in the grand legal experiment that has evolved over millennia. The fact that these laws were publicly displayed meant that, theoretically, every Babylonian from the farmer to the merchant was aware of their rights and obligations. That's a pretty democratic idea for a time when democracy itself was still a few centuries out from its Athenian debut. Now, about those myth-busting moments, let's tackle the notion that Hammurabi's code was the first of its kind. Not quite. It was more of a sequel in a series of legal codes that peppered ancient Mesopotamia, each building on the last like a very slow, very ancient game of legislative Jenga. The Code of Ur-Nammu, dating back to the 21st century BCE, had already paved the way with its own set of rules, and Hammurabi was merely refining the art. Yet, despite not being the first, Hammurabi's code is the most famous, partly because it was one of the most complete to survive. The laws were inscribed on an impressive 7-foot-tall steel made of diorite, a rock so hard that it was practically begging to last through the ages. And it did. When it was discovered in 1901 in what is now Iran, thanks to a bit of ancient looting, it put Hammurabi back on the map, not just as a king, but as a name synonymous with early legal innovation. But why did Hammurabi, the king, go to such lengths to codify these laws? It wasn't pure altruism. The Babylonian Empire was a patchwork of different cultures and languages. By establishing a standardized legal system, Hammurabi could knit these diverse peoples under a single banner of law, strengthening his control and legitimizing his rule. It was as much about power as it was about fairness. This code didn't just affect legal matters. It seeped into daily life, shaping the very nature of Babylonian society. The power dynamics it entrenched were clear. The higher your social status, the less severe your punishment. An eye for an eye applied liberally, but only if you were squaring off with someone of equal standing. If you were unfortunate enough to be a slave or of lower status, the scales of justice tilted heavily, often crushing you under their weight. So, as you wander these ancient streets, with their dusty markets and towering temples, remember that every transaction, every dispute, and every interaction is subtly influenced by these ancient laws. They guide the hands of scribes penning contracts, dictate the terms of trade between merchants, and even whisper into the ears of judges as they deliberate cases. The Code of Hammurabi wasn't just a set of rules. It was the backbone of a civilization striving to balance chaos and order. And while not perfect, it was a valiant attempt to bring some semblance of structure to a world in constant flux. Now, with the Code of Hammurabi setting the tone for law and order, let's shift our gaze to another cornerstone of Babylonian society, its religion. And oh boy, if you thought legal systems were complex, wait till you dive into the spiritual labyrinth of ancient Babylon. Standing tall, quite literally, in the Babylonian skyline were the ziggurats. These architectural marvels were the skyscrapers of their day, except instead of offices and coffee shops, they housed the divine. Picture the Edemenenki, the grand ziggurat of Babylon, a massive structure that some say inspired the biblical Tower of Babel. This was no ordinary temple. It was a 7-tiered colossus that reached a staggering height of about 91 meters. That's roughly the height of a 30-story building today. Imagine hauling bricks up that thing without the help of modern machinery. Talk about a workout. But these ziggurats were more than just impressive feats of engineering. They were the epicenter of religious life and power. High priests, decked out in their finest linen and adorned with gold, conducted rituals and offerings that were as much about politics as they were about piety. You see, in ancient Babylon, religion was the original opiate of the masses, with the priests as its pharmacists. And let's not overlook the economics of it all. Worshipping the gods didn't come cheap. Temple offerings were a must, and they weren't just your run-of-the-mill fruit baskets. We're talking livestock, grain, and costly incense. In a society where the average worker earned about 1 shekel a month, these offerings could cost a small fortune. It was like having a divine subscription service you couldn't unsubscribe from. And if you didn't pay up, well, let's say the gods weren't known for their forgiveness. The priests, acting as middlemen, ensured these celestial transactions went smoothly, all while keeping a nice cut for temple upkeep, and perhaps a little extra for themselves. The priests held sway over more than just the spiritual realm. They were the king's allies in maintaining control, wielding religious authority to legitimize royal power. The ziggurats, towering over the city, were constant reminders of this divine mandate. They reinforced the notion that the gods, and by extension, the king, were watching, judging, and most importantly in charge. Yet, despite their imposing presence, the ziggurats weren't exactly open to the public. They were more like exclusive clubs where only the elite, priests and royalty, could hang out. The common Babylonian could only gaze up at these towering structures, hoping that the priests were doing their job of keeping the gods appeased. It was a neat little system that kept everyone in line, with the divine as the ultimate authority figure. Now, let's tackle one of Babylon's most enduring legends, the Hanging Gardens. Ah, the gardens that never were. If there's a myth that's captured the imagination more vividly than any other, it's this one. Described as an oasis of lush greenery cascading from terraced balconies, it's the kind of place you'd want to sip mojitos in if only it had actually existed. Despite the romantic allure, there's scant evidence to suggest these gardens ever graced Babylonian soil. Ancient writers like Strabo and Philo waxed lyrical about them, but frustratingly, they wrote centuries after Babylon's peak, relying on hearsay at best. Many scholars now suspect the gardens were a case of mistaken identity, possibly confusing Babylon with Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. Yet, the myth persists, partly because it's just so enchanting. It's a classic example of how history sometimes prefers the beautiful lie over the harsh truth. In reality, Babylon was already a city of wonders without needing fictional gardens. The Ishtar Gate, with its stunning blue glazed bricks and depictions of dragons and bulls, was as real as it was awe-inspiring. It stood as a testament to Babylon's wealth and the artistry of its people. This gate, along with the ziggurats, formed a cityscape that was both a political statement and a religious spectacle. So, as you walk through Babylon, imagine the ziggurats towering above, casting long shadows over the city. Picture the priests, with their incense and incantations, weaving a tapestry of control that was both spiritual and political. Consider how these monumental structures were less about touching the heavens and more about keeping the earthly power dynamics firmly grounded. They were the ultimate expression of a society that understood the power of spectacle and the importance of keeping the gods and the people in check. Yet, the real magic of Babylon wasn't in its myths, but in its ability to blend power, religion, and daily life into a cohesive whole. It was a city where the divine and the mundane walked hand in hand, each step carefully choreographed by those in power. And while the Hanging Gardens may never have swayed in the breeze, the ziggurats stood as a testament to Babylon's enduring legacy. A legacy that, while sometimes romanticized, was rooted firmly in the realities of ancient power and politics. As we wrap up this segment, keep in mind that we've only scratched the surface of Babylon's complex society. The interplay between religion and politics was just one part of a broader narrative, setting the stage for the next chapter in our exploration of this ancient wonder. So stay tuned, because there's more to Babylon than meets the eye. Now, let's pivot from the lofty heights of Babylon's ziggurats to the ground-level grind that kept this ancient metropolis humming, its economic engine. We're talking about trade and agriculture, the true bedrock of Babylonian society, where the real action happened, not in the temples, but in the fields and markets. First, let's get our feet wet in the literal sense with Babylon's astonishing canal systems. Think of these as the highways of the ancient world, except instead of cars, you've got boats laden with grain. Spanning over a whopping 1,000 kilometers, these intricate waterways weren't just engineering marvels, they were lifelines. Without these canals, Babylon would have been a dusty footnote in history, rather than the legendary powerhouse we remember today. The canals were the veins pumping life into the Babylonian economy, ensuring the fields were as lush as a king's harem. Thanks to these waterways, agriculture thrived in a region where the sun could bake a loaf of bread without an oven. It wasn't just about growing crops. It was about controlling nature, bending the environment to human will, a classic Babylonian power move. They transformed the arid landscape into a breadbasket capable of sustaining a burgeoning population and fueling trade networks that stretched far beyond Mesopotamia. And let's talk about barley, the superstar crop of ancient Babylon. This wasn't just a foodstuff. It was currency, the Bitcoin of its day. Imagine your wallet filled not with paper bills or coins, but with grains of barley. It sounds quaint, but in a world where the average laborer earned about 30 liters of barley a month, this cereal was serious business. It was the standard against which everything else was measured, a tangible representation of wealth and stability in an era before central banks and credit scores. Brilliance of using barley as currency lay in its dual-purpose nature. It could be consumed or traded, providing a built-in safety net against famine. If the economy went south, you could literally eat your savings. Try doing that with a stock portfolio. This agricultural currency fostered a robust trade system where merchants became the rock stars of the Babylonian economy. They hustled goods from distant lands, bringing spices, textiles, and metals into the city, turning Babylon into a bustling hub of commerce. Babylonian merchants weren't just traders. They were the ancient world's equivalent of Wall Street brokers, minus the power suits. They navigated trade routes that snaked through the deserts and mountains, connecting Babylon with places as far-flung as the Indus Valley in Egypt. These merchants capitalized on Babylon's strategic position, making the city a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and goods. And here's the kicker. Babylonian merchants didn't just trade goods, they traded knowledge. The exchange of ideas was as valuable as the exchange of products. They were the conduits through which cultural and technological innovations flowed. Think of them as the original LinkedIn influencers, establishing networks and spreading trends long before social media made it cool. Let's not get too starry-eyed, though. While trade and agriculture were the lifeblood of Babylon, they weren't immune to the era's harsh realities. Weather, wars, and whims of the ruling class could turn prosperity into poverty faster than you could say Code of Hammurabi. Crops failed, trade routes were disrupted, and fortunes were lost, proof that even in ancient times, the economy was a fickle beast. But don't let the unpredictability fool you. Babylon's economy was resilient, constantly adapting to new challenges and opportunities. When one door closed, another opened, often with a more lucrative venture behind it. This dynamism was the secret to Babylon's enduring success, allowing the city to thrive even amid the chaos of ancient geopolitics. We can't talk about Babylon's bustling market scene without mentioning the bazaars, the beating heart of its commercial life. Picture a cacophony of haggling voices, the rich aroma of spices mingling with the scent of fresh-baked bread, and the vibrant colors of textiles fluttering in the breeze. These markets were the social media of their time, where news, gossip, and goods exchanged hands at a dizzying pace. The bazaars were more than just places to buy and sell. They were the social hubs where Babylonian life unfolded. Here, you could hear the latest news from distant lands, catch up on the juiciest palace gossip, and maybe even strike a deal that could change your fortunes forever. They were the living embodiment of Babylon's economic vitality, a testament to the city's ability to weave together the threads of trade, culture, and community. Yet, amid all this bustling prosperity, Babylon was a city of stark contrasts. For every wealthy merchant flaunting his success, there was a laborer toiling under the blazing sun, earning just enough barley to keep his family fed. It was a society where wealth was celebrated, but inequality was a constant companion, a reminder that even in the land of plenty, not everyone partook in the feast equally. In the grand narrative of history, it's easy to romanticize Babylon as a city of endless wealth and opportunity, but the reality was far more nuanced. It was a place where fortunes could be made and lost in a heartbeat, where the line between prosperity and poverty was as fine as the grains of barley that fueled its economy. It was a city of dreamers and doers, of risk-takers and rule-breakers, all striving for a piece of the Babylonian pie. As we wrap up this segment on Babylon's economic engine, Let's not forget that this was just one chapter in the city's rich tapestry. Trade and agriculture were the foundations upon which Babylon's greatness was built, but they were just the beginning. There's more to explore in this ancient wonder, more stories to tell, and more myths to debunk. So stick around, because we're just getting started. As we peel away the layers of Babylon's bustling markets and economic prowess, let's swivel our spotlight to a more intimate sphere of ancient life, family dynamics, and the social customs that bound them. Forget your modern notions of marital bliss and fairy tale weddings. In Babylon, marriage was more akin to a corporate merger than a romantic escapade. Picture this. You're a young Babylonian man in the market, not just browsing for the freshest dates, but also for a prospective bride. But before you get carried away imagining a scene out of a Nicholas Sparks novel, let's set the record straight. Love was a luxury, not a prerequisite. Instead, marriage was a calculated alliance, a contract sealed not with a kiss, but with a dowry. The dowry system was no small matter. We're talking serious economics here, folks. A typical dowry could include livestock, land, or even servants. Essentially, anything that could add value to the groom's family assets. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a prenup, only instead of signing it, you were living it. This wasn't just an exchange of vows. It was an exchange of wealth, ensuring both families came out ahead financially. Marriage contracts were meticulously detailed, etched in cuneiform on clay tablets. These weren't just romantic scribbles. They were legally binding documents, dictating everything from inheritance rights to the responsibilities of each spouse. We're talking about a Middle Eastern legalese that would give modern-day lawyers a run for their money. If the bride failed to produce offspring, or if the groom defaulted on his obligations, the contract spelled out the consequences in no uncertain terms. Love might have been optional, but compliance was not. Let's debunk another myth while we're at it. The idea that women in Babylon were universally oppressed and voiceless. Sure, the society was patriarchal, as most ancient ones were, but Babylonian women had certain rights that might surprise you. They could own property, run businesses, and even initiate divorce under specific conditions. In a world where women often had fewer rights than a clay tablet, Babylonian ladies had a semblance of agency. They were, in a way, the original multitaskers, juggling family responsibilities with economic activities, and sometimes legal battles. Now, before you start romanticizing this as a feminist utopia, let's not ignore the harsh realities. Despite their rights, women still faced societal pressures and limitations. Their status was often tied to their husbands or fathers, and stepping out of line could mean severe consequences. It was a delicate dance of agency and subjugation, balancing act on the tightrope of ancient societal norms. And what about the kiddos? In Babylon, children were valued for their potential contribution to the family unit. Sons were desirable for their ability to continue the family line and work the fields. Daughters, while less prized, were bargaining chips in marriage alliances. The education of children was another area where Babylon showed its unique flair. Boys from wealthy families could attend the Adaba, or tablet house, where they learned to read, write, and calculate. Their education was an investment, much like today's college fund, aimed at securing a prosperous future. Girls, on the other hand, were typically trained at home in the art of running a household, a skill set as valuable as any diploma. This gendered education system reflected the broader social structure, reinforcing the roles each sex was expected to play. It was practical, if not exactly progressive, ensuring that each generation was equipped to maintain the societal status quo. But let's not gloss over the darker side of family life. The Babylonian legal system, as progressive as it might seem with its marriage contracts and women's rights, also had its brutal side. Adoption, for example, was common, but not out of altruism. It was often a necessity, a way to ensure heirs for childless couples or to secure labor for farms and businesses. Children in these scenarios were little more than economic units, valued for their utility rather than their individuality. And then there were the penalties. If a son struck his father, the punishment was to cut off the son's hand. Talk about tough love. This wasn't just about discipline. It was about maintaining the social order. The family was a microcosm of Babylonian society, a place where the codes of Hammurabi were enforced with startling rigor. Yet, for all its rigidities, Babylonian family life was not devoid of warmth and affection. Families gathered for meals, celebrated festivals, and shared in communal activities. These moments of intimacy and joy, though often overshadowed by economic and legal concerns, were the threads that wove the fabric of daily life. They reminded Babylonians of their shared humanity, even as they navigated the complexities of their social structure. As we stand at the threshold of Babylonian homes, peering into their domestic arrangements, it's clear that family life was as complex and multifaceted as the city itself. It was a world of contracts and commitments, of love and legality, where personal relationships were intertwined with economic realities. As we continue our exploration of Babylon, remember that each family, each marriage contract, and each child's future was a reflection of the broader societal currents. They were the living embodiment of Babylon's ability to blend practicality with tradition, creating a civilization that was as dynamic as it was enduring. So, stick with us as we journey deeper into Babylon's intricate web of life, where the past continues to unravel in unexpected ways. Meanwhile, in the grand tapestry of time, as you take in the complex web of Babylonian family life, the scene shifts to a broader stage, a city teetering on the edge of decline. Babylon, once the jewel of Mesopotamia, didn't just collapse overnight. It was a slow-motion train wreck of epic proportions, driven by both internal discord and external pressures. Imagine a game of Jenga where every player is blindfolded and slightly tipsy. Things were bound to fall apart. Internally, Babylon wasn't exactly a model of harmony. Political infighting was as common as sand in a desert. Each ruler seemed to have a penchant for stirring the pot, often leading to civil strife. The city's governance was like a soap opera, except with more beheadings and fewer commercial breaks. As powerful families jockeyed for control, the social fabric began to fray. Picture this: a city where loyalty was as fickle as the Tigris River in spring, alliances shifted like desert dunes, and betrayal was practically a bonding activity. Externally, Babylon faced threats from every direction. The Hittites, Assyrians, and Elamites all took turns playing the role of unwelcome house guests, each leaving the city a little worse for wear. The most devastating blow came not from outside invaders, but from within. A guy named Cyrus the Great of Persia, who clearly skipped the part of history class where empires are supposed to respect each other's boundaries. In 539 BCE, Cyrus waltzed into Babylon with a strategy that was less shock and awe, and more surprise and negotiate. The city fell with barely a whimper, largely due to the populace's disillusionment with their rulers. It turns out, when your subjects are more excited to see your conqueror than you, it's time to rethink your PR strategy. Yet, despite the chaos of its downfall, Babylon's story didn't end in rubble. The city's legacy extended far beyond its physical collapse. Babylon became a symbol, a cautionary tale wrapped in myth and legend. The most enduring of these tales is the Tower of Babel, a story of ambition and hubris, allegedly explaining why humans speak different languages. Spoiler alert, there's no archaeological evidence of this tower ever existing. But hey, why let facts ruin a perfectly good narrative? This myth, like the Hanging Gardens, persists because it taps into universal themes of ambition, overreach, and the quest for divine status. It's a story as old as time, dressed in the trappings of Babylonian grandeur. What about the archaeological evidence, you ask? Well, archaeologists have uncovered plenty to remind us of Babylon's tangible achievements: massive city walls, intricate canal systems, and the aforementioned ziggurats. These artifacts paint a picture of a city that was as real as it was remarkable. But the physical evidence also tells the tale of a civilization that was ultimately unsustainable. The canals that once fed Babylon's fields became its Achilles heel, as salinization and neglect turned fertile land into barren wasteland. It's a classic case of nature biting back, a reminder that even the mightiest cities are at the mercy of the environment. In modern times, Babylon's story has been romanticized, dramatized, and sometimes downright fictionalized. Hollywood loves a good epic, and Babylon provides all the raw material for tales of grandeur, decadence, and downfall. But peel back the layers of myth, and you're left with the raw, gritty reality. A civilization that achieved great heights, but was ultimately undone by its own complexity and overreach. As we wrap up our journey through ancient Babylon, it's worth considering the lessons its rise and fall offer us. Babylon's story underscores the timeless truth that empires are fragile constructs, vulnerable to both human folly and nature's whims. It's a reminder that no matter how grand our aspirations, we are all subject to the same universal laws of balance and consequence. Whether in ancient Mesopotamia or the modern world, the line between order and chaos remains razor-thin. So, as we stand amid the dust and echoes of Babylon's past, let's not only marvel at its achievements, but also heed its warnings. History may not repeat itself, but it rhymes, and Babylon's legacy is one that continues to resonate through the ages. As a city of legends and lessons, Babylon reminds us to tread carefully on our own paths of ambition, lest we too build our towers too high and watch them crumble in the sands of time. You wake up to the sound of clanging metal and the groans of overworked donkeys. Welcome to your first, and probably last, day as a medieval merchant in a caravan. Forget the romantic visions of silk-robed traders gliding serenely across the landscape. The reality is more back-breaking labor and less Silk Road glamour. You're staring at a chaotic scene where the only thing more plentiful than dust is the shouting. Picture this: stacks of goods teetering precariously on rickety wooden carts, which, let's be honest, look like they're held together by prayers and a bit of twine. You're in the company of some of the era's big economic powerhouses, like the Genos and the Hasidic League, the medieval equivalents of today's Amazon and Alibaba. These guys aren't playing around. They're the rock stars of the trade world, covering staggering distances, sometimes over 3,000 miles, just to bring you that perfect bolt of fabric. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let's talk logistics. You're in charge of loading goods this morning, which sounds straightforward until you realize the sheer variety and value of what's on offer. You've got everything from bolts of silk, shimmering like a kaleidoscope of colors, to sacks of spices. And when I say spices, I mean the kind worth their weight in gold. No exaggeration here. Pepper was once so valuable it was used to pay rent. Imagine settling your monthly dues with a handful of black peppercorns. Now, you might be thinking, how did things get so valuable? Well, let's just say it wasn't because they were easy to get. These goods have traveled across continents, some from as far as the Far East. We're talking about a journey that could last months, with traders braving everything from bandits to bad weather. The Genos, for instance, were known for their maritime prowess, navigating treacherous waters to secure their cargo. Meanwhile, the Hasidic League was dominating trade routes across northern Europe, a formidable network that spanned from the Baltic to the North Sea. Back to the task at hand. You've got to load all this onto carts that look like they've seen better days, possibly around the time the first stone of the Parthenon was laid. There's no forklift in sight. It's all manpower, or rather, your power. You find yourself wrestling with a bolt of silk that seems determined to unravel itself. While you're trying not to strangle yourself with luxury fabric, spare a thought for the merchants who risked it all to get these goods here. The stakes were high, and losing a shipment could mean financial ruin. And speaking of ruin, let's talk about the roads, or lack thereof. The term road is generous. What you're dealing with is more of a dirt track, pockmarked with potholes that could swallow a small child. These routes meander through towns that cling to existence, offering your caravan little more than place to stop and maybe, if you're lucky, a heart meal. The Silk Road is the stuff of legend, but the reality is a network of grueling paths where the journey is often more perilous and the destination is profitable. Economically, these caravans are the lifeblood of medieval trade, connecting distant markets in a time before globalization was even a concept. Trade wasn't just a way to earn a living, it was a means to wield power. The Genos knew this well. They didn't just trade, they dominated. Their control over key Mediterranean ports allowed them to dictate terms and prices. Meanwhile, the Hasidic League was more like a medieval trade union, a collection of merchants and cities banding together to protect their economic interests. As you stagger under the weight of yet another bundle, let's bust a myth. This isn't the realm of lone wolf adventurers striking out with nothing but a map and a dream. Successful traders were often part of well-organized guilds or leagues, providing a network of contacts, legal protections, and perhaps most importantly, credit. Ah, yes, credit. The medieval equivalent of your modern credit card, minus the plastic and the exorbitant interest rates. Instead of swiping, you'd strike a deal, promising to pay once your goods sold at the next market. Finally, Let's ponder the absurdity of it all. You're in a world where a single spice is worth its weight in gold, where the risk of losing everything is taken on a daily basis, and where the promise of profit propels you across thousands of miles. It's a high-stakes game, and today you're just one cog in this vast, creaking machine. As the sun climbs higher and the heat becomes oppressive, you realize why this lifestyle isn't for the faint of heart. The idea of spending your days in the comfort of a medieval castle, or even a modest home, seems infinitely more appealing than this back-breaking work. So, as you wipe the sweat from your brow and prepare to hit the road, remember that you're part of a grand tradition. Medieval trade might not have had the convenience of today's online shopping, but it laid the groundwork for the global economy we know now. While you might not last a day, these merchants had grit, determination, and a healthy disregard for comfort, qualities that, despite the aches and pains, demand a certain respect. So, you're on the road with your medieval caravan, and the only thing less stable than those rickety carts is your patience. Let's dive into the ultimate real-life horror, medieval travel conditions. Forget the smooth asphalt you've come to love. Back then, roads were essentially glorified goat trails. The Romans built some decent ones, but by the medieval period, they were as neglected as last year's New Year's resolutions. You're dodging potholes big enough to host a family of badgers, all while trying not to lose a wheel, and your sanity. But hey, at least you're not alone. You're part of a convoy, a medieval version of a safety net, because going solo would be like playing Frogger on a highway blindfolded. Bandits were the original highwaymen, and they were as persistent as they were unscrupulous. With swords instead of spreadsheets, they'd relieve you of your hard-earned goods faster than you can say merchant tax. These guys didn't discriminate. They'd rob a beggar if he had anything worth stealing. You see, in a world without police patrols or GPS tracking, safety in numbers wasn't just a cliché. It was survival 101. Now, about those ingenious security measures. You're probably picturing armored guards and reinforced wagons, right? Not quite. Think more along the lines of hired muscle and dogs that look like they've seen the business end of a battle axe. Merchant caravans often employed mercenaries, those charming fellows who'd fight for anyone willing to pay them. It wasn't exactly the Secret Service, but it got the job done, or at least it kept the more cautious bandits at bay. As for legal systems, well, let's just say they were as predictable as a medieval weather forecast. You could be hauled up in front of a local lord for a crime you didn't commit, simply because you looked at someone the wrong way. Justice was often swift and rarely fair, with punishments ranging from fines to, losing a hand or two. It was a little like playing roulette, except with your life. Still, merchants had to navigate these legal waters, often relying on guilds for support. If you were caught in a legal bind, having a guild's backing was like having a medieval lawyer on retainer, minus the exorbitant hourly rate. Despite the legal and physical threats, the allure of profit kept merchants on the road. But let's crush the myth of the noble merchant bravely trading for the betterment of mankind. This was about cold, hard cash, or rather, gold coins stamped with the image of some monarch who probably didn't care about trade unless it lined his coffers. Merchants were often as cutthroat as the bandits they feared, undercutting each other's prices and forming monopolies faster than you can say free market. And then there's the issue of tariffs and tolls. Picture this. You finally make it to the next town, only to be greeted not with open arms, but with open palms. Local lords were big fans of tolls, a medieval version of a highway robbery that was, ironically, entirely legal. You'd have to cough up some coin just to pass through, and if you thought you could sneak by, think again. These toll collectors were as vigilant as they were greedy. No one was above the toll, except maybe the king, who was too busy collecting taxes to bother with such trivialities. Economically, these journeys were high-stakes endeavors. You might be hauling goods worth a king's ransom, but one misstep could turn you into a pauper. Remember, there were no insurance policies to fall back on, no bailout plans from the medieval government. You sank or swam on your own merit and luck. The Genos and Hanseatic League merchants knew this all too well. They'd hedged their bets by spreading the risk, literally. Instead of one merchant carrying a single cargo, they'd divvy it up among several, so if one was lost, others might still profit. It was diversification before the term even existed. And let's not forget the delightful medieval towns you'd pass through. These weren't bustling metropolises. They were more like clusters of buildings huddled together for warmth and mutual defense. You might start for a meal, but don't expect gourmet dining. The menu was often whatever didn't spoil yet, and ale was the drink of choice, partly because the water was about as clean as a mud puddle. Still, these towns were vital links in the trade network, offering a chance to restock, repair, and regroup. As you trudge along, let's acknowledge the paradox of medieval trade. It was both a driver of economic development and a source of endless misery. The promise of wealth dangled before you like a carrot on a very long stick, but the reality was more stick than carrot. The merchants who thrived were those who could balance ambition with caution, much like a tightrope walker with a penchant for risk. So, as the sun sets and you prepare to make camp, take a moment to reconsider your romantic notions of medieval trade. It wasn't all about exotic goods and heroic journeys. It was grit, grime, and a whole lot of gamble. But for those who could endure, the rewards were immense, not just in riches, but in the stories they'd have to tell. And that, my friend, is your glimpse into the underbelly of medieval trade, a world as captivating as it was cruel. Now, as the campfire casts flickering shadows on weary faces, you find yourself amidst a living tapestry of medieval society. Forget the notion of an egalitarian caravan where everyone's equal under the stars. In reality, this was a social jungle where the hierarchy was as pronounced as a medieval prince's double chin. So, who's who in this traveling circus of commerce? At the top of this food chain is the merchant prince, the big kahuna of the caravan. This isn't just some guy with a few coins to rub together. He's the Jeff Bezos of the medieval world. With coffers as deep as his ambition, he's the one calling the shots, deciding which markets to hit and which to skip. He rides at the head of the caravan, literally and figuratively above the dust and chaos, probably on a horse that eats better than half his crew. His attire is a walking billboard of wealth. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a tailored suit and a Rolex, except it's all brocade and gold thread embroidery. But don't be fooled. Our merchant prince isn't just about looking the part. He's got a head for numbers and a nose for profit. Every transaction is a calculated risk, and he's got the mental abacus to prove it. He's the reason this caravan exists, and everything revolves around his decisions. You could say he's the sun in this solar system of trade, though some might argue he's more of a black hole sucking in all the wealth. Next in line are the master traders, the merchant prince's trusted lieutenants. They're the middle management of this operation, handling the nitty-gritty of negotiations and logistics. They're the ones who haggle with local merchants, ensuring the caravan turns a profit at every stop. These folks are seasoned pros, having spent years bartering everything from furs to fineries. They wield their abasai like weapons, slicing through numbers with the precision of a surgeon, or at least as close as you can get with a counting board. Lurking in the shadows are the guards, the muscle of the caravan. They're not just there to look intimidating, though they certainly do. Armed with swords and a disposition that would make a honey badger seem friendly, they're the reason bandits think twice before swooping in. These guys are mercenaries, loyal only to their pay packets, which the merchant prince keeps well stocked. Their presence is a reminder that, while trade might be the main event, security is the unsung hero that makes it all possible. And then there are the porters, the unsung workhorses of the operation. If the merchant prince is the brain, these guys are the brawn. They're the ones loading and unloading, ensuring that every crumb of cargo reaches its destination. Their backs bear the weight of the caravan's fortune, and their hands are as calloused as their humor is dry. Socially, they're at the bottom rung, but don't let that fool you into thinking they're powerless. In the grand scheme of things, they're the glue holding this teetering pile of commerce together. Let's not forget the hangers-on, the colorful cast of characters that seem to pop up wherever caravans go. From traveling musicians to fortune-tellers, these folks are the medieval equivalent of roadside attractions. They add spice to the soup, entertaining the crew and occasionally providing valuable information. And yes, even the jester has a role. Don't scoff. In a world as grim as this, a good laugh might be all that stands between you and utter despair. Now, let's tackle the romantic notion of the caravan as a great equalizer. The truth is, your social class was as visible as the grime under your nails. The merchant prince dines on delicacies, while the porters make do with hard bread and tougher meat. It's a hierarchy as rigid as a knight's armor, with clear lines drawn between who's who and what's what. But there's a twisted kind of camaraderie here, born out of shared hardship and mutual dependence. As you mingle with this motley crew, you'll notice something else, the pungent aroma of humanity. Let's dive into the less than glamorous reality of medieval hygiene. Think of it as the elephant in the room, except this elephant hasn't bathed in weeks and is quite proud of it. Bathing was a luxury, not a necessity. While the wealthy might indulge in the occasional soak, the rest made do with a splash of water and a prayer. The concept of deodorant was as foreign as a unicorn sighting, and perfumes were practically gold in liquid form. In this fragrant setting, lice and fleas are practically family pets, and the threat of disease looms large. The Black Death is still fresh in memory, a grim reminder of how swiftly hygiene can turn deadly. Latrines are little more than holes in the ground, and waste disposal is an afterthought. The stench is a part of life, as much a companion as the clatter of hooves and the creak of wooden wheels. Despite the grime and grit, there's an undeniable allure to this world. It's a tapestry woven with threads of adventure, danger, and the promise of untold wealth. The Caravan is a microcosm of medieval society, a place where ambition collides with reality, and where every journey is a gamble with fortune. This is the medieval merchant's caravan, brimming with life, laughter, and the lingering odor of historical authenticity. And as you navigate its complexities, you start to see the bigger picture of a world in motion, propelled by the wheels of commerce and the dreams of those bold enough to chase them. So as the night deepens and the camp settles into a restless slumber, remember that you're not just traveling through a landscape of rolling hills and ancient towns. You're journeying through time, exploring the very foundations of our modern economy and the intricate web of human interactions that sustain it. And tomorrow, the caravan rolls on, taking you deeper into the heart of medieval trade, where every mile is a story waiting to unfold. The morning sun peeks over the horizon, casting long shadows on the caravan as you prepare for another day on the medieval trade road. As the camp stirs to life, you're reminded of the saying among merchants, "A day on the road is worth a month in the market." And they're not just talking about profit margins. This is about the cultural kaleidoscope that unfolds at every stop, a veritable United Nations on wheels, minus the bureaucracy and with a lot more body odor. In a single day, you might hear half a dozen languages, Latin, Arabic, Old French, and a smattering of local dialects that sound like they were invented by someone with a penchant for tongue twisters. It's like being at a linguistic buffet, except you're also the waiter, the chef, and the guy who has to clean up after the feast. If you're not adept at switching tongues faster than a politician dodging a question, you're in for a rough ride. But don't worry, you won't be alone in this verbal juggling act. Medieval merchants were the original polyglots, swapping languages as easily as they traded goods. And it wasn't just for show, it was survival. Imagine trying to sell your wares without understanding a word of what your buyer is saying. You'd be better off trying to sell ice to the Inuits. Fluency in multiple languages was the key to unlocking markets and avoiding misunderstandings that could lead to, well, less than favorable outcomes. Speaking of which, let's chat about the goods you're hauling. These aren't just trinkets and baubles. We're talking about a treasure trove of items that represent the very best, and occasionally worst, of 3 continents. From the fragrant spices of India to the silks of China and the furs of Russia, your caravan is a rolling testament to the saying that one man's exotic luxury is another's everyday necessity. You'll find yourself bartering for things that sound like they belong in a fairy tale. Nutmeg that costs more than its weight in gold, saffron worth more than a knight's ransom, and fabrics that could bankrupt a small duchy. And as you pass through bustling trade hubs, you'll encounter a veritable melting pot of religions and politics. The Silk Road wasn't just a freeway for commerce. It was a highway for ideas. You've got Buddhists exchanging pleasantries with Muslims, Christians cracking deals with Hindus, and the occasional Zoroastrian pondering the meaning of life. Religious tolerance wasn't born out of altruism. It was necessity. You couldn't afford to alienate potential trading partners over theological disputes when there were profits to be made. Diplomatic savvy was as essential as swordsmanship, and sometimes even more so. Consider the political landscape you're navigating. Trade routes were shaped by the whims of rulers who saw commerce as both a blessing and a threat. A smart merchant knew how to read the political tea leaves, understanding when to grease palms and when to steer clear of territories on the brink of war. The Mongols, for instance, once transformed the Silk Road into a safe passage for traders, securing routes that would have otherwise been a logistical nightmare. Their Pax Mongolica opened up unprecedented opportunities for cultural and commercial exchange, though it came with a brutal price tag in terms of conquest and control. And let's not ignore the culinary oddities that arose from these exchanges. When East met West, it wasn't just goods and ideas that collided, but flavors. You might find yourself dining on combinations that would make a modern gourmet shudder. Imagine pairing saffron with, well, everything. This precious spice was like the medieval version of ketchup, if ketchup cost a fortune and could be used to cure ailments, impress guests, and occasionally, yes, even flavor food. Saffron in your stew, saffron in your wine, saffron in your sweet pastries. No dish was safe from its golden touch. Of course, these exotic flavors came with their own set of challenges. Not everyone was thrilled about the culinary mashups that dotted the medieval menu. The first time an Englishman encountered a spicy dish from the East, he probably thought he was being poisoned. But for those willing to embrace the unknown, these culinary concoctions offered a taste of the world in a single bite, a reminder of the interconnectedness of humanity long before the term global village was coined. And as you journey onward, spare a thought for the merchants who became unwitting ambassadors of culture. They didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, stories, and traditions. A Persian rug might find its way into a French shadow, while a tale of the Arabian Nights could captivate an Italian court. This wasn't just trade, it was cultural diplomacy at its finest, weaving a tapestry of shared human experience across continents. So, as the caravan snakes its way through the winding paths of history, remember that you're not just moving goods. You're part of a grand exchange, a living testament to the power of trade to transcend boundaries and bring the world a little closer together. With every step, you're walking in the footsteps of countless traders who dared to dream of a world where East meets West, not as adversaries, but as partners in commerce and culture. And who knows what tomorrow will bring? Perhaps new alliances, new languages to learn, or even a new dish to sample that combines flavors you never imagined could coexist. Whatever the case, rest assured that the journey is far from over, and the stories yet to be told are as numerous as the stars above. So keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind open, for the road ahead promises adventures that are as unpredictable as they are unforgettable. And as the caravan presses onward, you're reminded that every sunset marks not just the end of a day, but the dawn of new challenges. As twilight descends, the time comes to transform this ragtag assemblage of merchants and goods into a makeshift village. Setting up camp is a bit like assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. Except here, instead of hex keys and Allen wrenches, you've got ropes and stakes that seem to have a mind of their own. Let's start with your digs for the night. Forget plush bedding or memory foam pillows. Luxuries like that are as distant as the stars overhead. Instead, you've got a straw mattress that feels like it was designed by an ancient torture enthusiast. A tent, if you're lucky, provides your only shelter from the elements, but waterproof is as elusive a concept as an honest politician. Rain has a habit of sneaking in, turning your sleeping quarters into a medieval splash zone. And as for comfort, well, a good night's sleep is about as likely as finding a unicorn grazing nearby. Now, if you think a quiet night under the stars sounds idyllic, think again. Medieval campsites are a cacophony of sounds that makes Times Square on New Year's Eve seem serene. There's the constant braying of donkeys, the clatter of pots and pans, and the occasional argument that erupts over who gets the last scrap of bread. And let's not forget the ever-present threat of bandits. Night watch is a necessity, and sleep is snatched in fitful bursts between shifts, ensuring that paranoia becomes your closest bedfellow. But setting up camp is just the prelude to the main event, the trade fair. Imagine Amazon Prime Day, Black Friday, the county fair rolled into one, but with more mud, fewer electronics, and enough haggling to make a used car salesman blush. These fairs were the lifeblood of medieval commerce, where missing out wasn't just inconvenient, it could spell financial ruin faster than you can say overdraft fee. For merchants, these events were the culmination of months of travel, a chance to offload goods and make crucial connections. The champagne fairs in France are the stuff of legend, drawing merchants from as far afield as Venice and Flanders. Here, you'd find everything from Flemish cloth to Venetian glass, all jostling for attention in a bustling market that could last up to 6 weeks. Success here wasn't just about having the best goods. It was about playing the long game, cultivating relationships, and navigating a labyrinthine network of social and economic alliances. Miss out on a fair, and you might as well have thrown your wares into the nearest river. But let's talk economics. These fairs were more than just opportunities to make a quick buck. They were the medieval stock exchanges, where fortunes could be made or lost in a heartbeat. Prices fluctuated wildly based on supply and demand, and a smart merchant knew how to read the market like a gambler with a hard hand. Credit was king, with merchants often relying on promissory notes and complex financial instruments that would make a modern banker's head spin. It was a high-stakes game, and one false move could leave you with nothing but empty pockets and a long walk home. As you sit around the campfire, reflecting on the day's trials and triumphs, it's easy to romanticize the life of a medieval merchant. The allure of adventure and the promise of untold riches paint a tempting picture, but the reality is far less glamorous. You're constantly at the mercy of weather, illness, and geopolitical upheavals. A single storm could destroy months of planning, while a sudden outbreak of disease could decimate your workforce faster than you can say, "Plague Doctor." And let's not ignore the existential crisis lurking in the shadows. The life of a merchant was one of perpetual motion, a constant race against time and competition. It was a world where you could be a king one day and a beggar the next, where the only certainty was uncertainty itself. The road was long and unforgiving, and the rewards, while potentially immense, often came at a steep personal cost. So why do it? Why endure the hardships, the sleepless nights, the relentless grind? Because at the heart of it all was the promise of something greater, a chance to shape the world, to be part of the grand tapestry of human history. Merchants were the unsung heroes of their time, bridging cultures and economies, laying the groundwork for a global network that would one day connect every corner of the earth. They weren't just traders. They were pioneers, dreamers, and in their own way, revolutionaries. As the embers of the fire flicker and die, you realize that, while you might not last a day in this world without a modern amenity or two, there's a part of you that can't help but admire their grit and determination. Despite the grime and danger, there's a romance to the road, a sense of purpose that transcends the daily grind. The medieval merchant's world was one of paradoxes, a place where hardship and hope walked hand in hand, forging a legacy that shaped the world we live in today. And as you finally lay your head down on that lumpy straw mattress, you might find yourself grateful for the comforts of modern life, but also inspired by the tenacity of those who came before. Their journey is a reminder that while the road may be long and the challenge is great, the rewards of perseverance are boundless. So sleep tight. Tomorrow promises more adventures, more challenges, and more stories waiting to be told. You wake up to a soundtrack of clinking armor and the familiar smell of sweat, your own, plus a dozen others who share this cramped barrack. It's a glamorous life, being a gladiator in ancient Rome. Well, maybe not glamorous, but certainly not boring. As the sun rises over the eternal city, you're pulling yourself together for a day of blood, sweat, and barley porridge, your breakfast of champions. And yes, you heard that right. Forget about eggs and bacon. It's all about the carbs here. Barley porridge is your staple, and it's as exciting as it sounds. But hey, it works. The Romans believed it gave you strength and stamina, and who are you to argue with the dietary wisdom of an empire? Now, let's talk about why you're here. If you're a gladiator, chances are you're either a slave or a volunteer. That's right, some folks actually signed up for this. Maybe you're seeking fame, fortune, or just trying to pay off a debt. For many, it's an economic decision as much as anything else. The allure of the arena is undeniable. Win enough fights, and you might just buy your freedom, or at least live like a rock star of the ancient world. But let's not sugarcoat it. Most gladiators didn't live to enjoy the spoils. The average life expectancy of a gladiator, not exactly retirement age. Training isn't a free ride either. The costs of training are as sharp as a gladiator's sword. Your Lannister or trainer invests in you like a prized racehorse. Gear isn't cheap. Your helmet, arm guards, and sword could cost more than a new chariot. And that's before we talk about the highly specialized training regimen. You're not just swinging a sword around willy-nilly, you're honing your skills with precision. The Lannister wants his investment to pay off in spades. After all, you're his ticket to a hefty payday if you win. Speaking of winning, the financial incentives are the real carrot at the end of the spear. Glory and gold await the champions, but not without risk. Win a few bouts, and the prize money starts to add up. Think of it as ancient Rome's version of a bonus check, only with a lot more blood. But this isn't just about the cash. There's a twisted sort of celebrity status that comes with being a successful gladiator. You can actually become the talk of the town, your name on the lips of aristocrats and commoners alike. Forget the Kardashians. This is the original reality show. But let's face it, the life of a gladiator is no cakewalk. The economic starkness hits hard. You're not just fighting for your life in the arena, you're fighting for a shot at a better life outside of it. Most of your money goes back into training, gear, and maybe a little something to make your grim life a bit more bearable. It's a vicious cycle. Without victory, there's no payday. And without a payday, there's no chance of escape from the gritty grind. While the romantic image of the lone gladiator, sword in hand, facing down a lion is certainly appealing, the reality is a lot less cinematic. You're part of a brutal system that profits from your pain and valor, a cog in the grand spectacle of Roman entertainment. But right now, all of that is a distant roar, like the crowd you'll face in the arena later. For now, it's just you, your barley porridge, and the dawning reality that today's contest might just be your last. Welcome to the arena, where every day is a fight for survival, and breakfast is always a reminder of the stakes. Now, let's take a closer look at your daily grind in the Ludus, or Gladiator school, where the Lannister runs the show. This guy is your coach, mentor, and maybe even your worst nightmare all rolled into one. If you thought your high school gym teacher was tough, wait until you meet the Lannister. He's got a singular focus, turning you into a fighting machine. Think of him as the ultimate personal trainer, but with a heavier emphasis on survival than on six-pack abs. Your training regimen isn't just a casual jog around the Colosseum. Oh no, it's a full-on boot camp with a Roman twist. Before you even think about picking up a weapon that could actually hurt someone, you're stuck with Rudies, wooden swords that are about as deadly as a toothpick. But don't let that fool you. These wooden weapons are your best friends for now. They teach control, precision, and endurance, qualities you'll need when the stakes are higher than a game of charades. Now, the Lannister isn't exactly known for his patience. Make a mistake, and you'll quickly learn that punishment is part of the curriculum. We're not talking about a slap on the wrist here. Think more along the lines of a swift kick or a lash of the whip. The Lannister's tough love approach ensures that you remember those footwork drills next time you're squaring off against someone whose sole aim is to make you yesterday's news. Training isn't all about brute force, though. The Lannister knows that the best gladiators combine brawn with brains. You're drilled in tactics and strategies, learning how to read your opponent as if you're deciphering an ancient manuscript. It's a mental chess game, and your life is the prize. Every move you make in the arena has to be calculated to perfection, or it's game over. You might be wondering why anyone would volunteer for this life. Well, the myth of the gladiator as an ancient rock star has a certain appeal. Imagine the crowd's roar, the rush of adrenaline, the fame that comes with being a crowd favorite. But here's the twist. For every gladiator who becomes a household name, dozens more end up as just another footnote in history. The reality is, you're more likely to be remembered as a nameless casualty than the next Maximus Decimus Meridius. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a certain allure to this gritty lifestyle. Sure, you face the constant threat of death, but there's something intoxicating about the potential for glory. In a society where social mobility is about as common as a snowstorm in the Sahara, the arena offers a shot at the big time. You might start as a nobody, but with a few well-placed strikes and a dash of luck, you could become the toast of the town. Now, let's not gloss over the discipline involved. The Lannisters' regime is relentless. Picture this: hours of marching drills, shield work until your arms feel like lead, and sparring sessions that leave you bruised and battered. It's not just physical. It's about molding your mind into a warrior's psyche. You need to be ready to face not just human opponents, but wild beasts too. Because yes, some days, it's lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And don't forget the diet. We've mentioned your barley porridge breakfast, but that's just the beginning. Your meals are designed to bulk you up, keep you lean, and give you the energy to face whatever the Colosseum throws at you. Forget about refined sugar or processed snacks. It's all about the basics here. Protein, carbs, and more carbs to keep you fighting fit. In this world, reputation is everything. A good record in the arena can mean the difference between life and death, literally. Win enough fights, and you might earn the wooden sword of freedom, a symbol that you've paid your dues and can now retire if you live long enough to enjoy it. But let's be honest, the odds are stacked against you. The average gladiator's career is about as long as a Roman senator's toga. So, is the life of a gladiator glamorous? Only if you consider sweat, blood, and the constant fear of death glamorous. But there's no denying the magnetic pull of the arena. It's the ultimate stage, where every fight is a performance, and every move could be your last. You're not just fighting for survival, you're fighting to be remembered, to make your mark in a world that's as brutal as it is awe-inspiring. And so, as you pick up your wooden sword and prepare for another day of grueling training, you're not just honing your skills. You're shaping your destiny, one swing at a time, under the watchful eye of the Lannister, who knows that every gladiator is just one fight away from glory or oblivion. Welcome to the life of a gladiator, where the stakes are as high as the Colosseum walls, and every day is a battle for both survival and significance. So, you've spent the morning getting battered and bruised in the ludus, and now it's time for the real show to begin. The midday sun is high, casting shadows like a giant sundial over the Colosseum. You might be wondering why the Romans scheduled these games for noon, when the sun is at its most punishing. Well, nothing says spectacle like a little heat stroke on the side. Besides, the games weren't just for entertainment. They were a tool for social control, a way to keep the masses entertained and distracted from the less savory bits of Roman life, like politics and those pesky taxes. As you prepare for the games, it's time to suit up. This isn't some casual costume party. Your armor is your lifeline. Depending on your style, you could be a murmillo, with a helmet that makes you look like a walking tank, or a restful, armed with nothing more than a net and a trident. Talk about bringing a toothpick to a knife fight. The murmillo's gear is heavy, weighing up to 30 kilograms, which is a real leg workout even before you start swinging a sword. The restful, on the other hand, relies on speed and agility, darting around like a fish in a barrel. Only the barrel is full of lions and angry fellow gladiators. And let's not forget the threeks and the secutor, each with their own special gear and fighting style. The threeks sports a curved short sword and a small shield, making him a master of close combat. The secutor, meanwhile, is designed to hunt down the restful, with a rounded helmet that helps him avoid getting tangled in that pesky net. It's like a deadly game of rock, paper, scissors, with a lot more blood. Now, let's talk politics. The Colosseum is more than just an ancient amphitheater. It's the emperor's playground. These games didn't just happen by accident. They were carefully orchestrated events, often sponsored by the emperor himself, or wealthy patrons eager to curry favor with the public. It was the ancient equivalent of a Super Bowl halftime show, only with more swords and fewer wardrobe malfunctions. Emperors like Augustus and Trajan used these spectacles to broadcast their power and generosity, offering free bread and circuses to keep the populace happy, and more importantly, distracted. But here's the kicker. The games served a deeper, more sinister purpose. They reinforced the social hierarchy, reminding everyone of their place in the grand Roman scheme. The emperor and the wealthy elites sat in the best seats, while the commoners crowded into the nosebleeds, quite literally looking up to their rulers. The message was clear. Know your place, and maybe you'll get to live another day to enjoy the show. For the gladiators, these games were a double-edged sword. On one hand, they were the stars of the show, the crowd favorites who could sway public opinion with a single well-placed strike. On the other hand, they were expendable, a means to an end in the grand spectacle. A gladiator's life was precarious at best, teetering on the whims of fate and the crowd's bloodlust. But in a world where social mobility was rarer than a snowstorm in the Sahara, the arena offered a slim chance at glory and freedom. And then there's the matter of execution. For those deemed enemies of the state, or just unlucky enough to fall out of favor, the games served as a public reminder of the consequences of defying Roman authority. Criminals and prisoners of war found themselves thrust into the arena, facing not just professional gladiators, but also wild beasts. Lions, tigers, and the occasional bear, oh my, were all part of the show, a reminder of Rome's power to conquer both man and nature. So, as you strap on your armor and prepare to face whatever the Colosseum throws at you, remember that you're part of something much bigger than just a fight. You're a pawn in a grand political chess game, a living testament to the might and splendor of Rome. But hey, no pressure, right? The anticipation in the air is palpable as you step into the arena, the roar of the crowd like a tidal wave crashing down. It's a heady mix of fear and adrenaline, kind of rush that some thrill seekers today might find on a roller coaster. Only your ride could end with more than just a souvenir photo. The crowd is hungry for blood, their cheers and jeers echoing off the stone walls. It's a scene of both awe and horror, a testament to the enduring power of spectacle. As you square off against your opponent, you can't help but think about the fickle nature of fame. Today, you could be the hero of the hour, the name on everyone's lips. Tomorrow, you might be just another casualty, forgotten as quickly as the sand swallows your blood. But for now, you're alive, the center of attention, and in this brutal dance of death, every move counts. In a world where life was often nasty, brutish, and short, the games provided a rare chance for ordinary Romans to feel a part of something grand. It was a spectacle like no other, a shared experience that reinforced the bonds of community and the power of the empire. But beneath the glamour and the glory, the harsh realities of life as a gladiator loomed large. As the sun begins to set and the games draw to a close, the crowd disperses, satiated by the day's events. For you, the day isn't over. There's the cleanup, the debrief, and the inevitable tallying of wounds. But for now, you've survived, another day one in the arena of life. And as you head back to the barracks, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring. Will it be one step closer to freedom, or just another reminder of the precariousness of your existence? Only time will tell, and in the world of the gladiator, time is the most precious commodity of all. As you shuffle back to the barracks, muscles aching and mind racing, you can't shake the feeling that today was more than just another day at the office. Tomorrow, you'll once again find yourself in that sandy pit, testing the limits of your endurance and nerve. But before you can even think about tomorrow, let's take a closer look at what really goes down when you're toe-to-toe with another gladiator in the Colosseum. First off, let's debunk the idea that these battles were just two dudes hacking away at each other until one dropped dead. Sure, Hollywood loves that image, but in reality, gladiatorial combat was closer to WWE than to a street brawl. There were rules, and not just the don't poke the other guy in the eye kind. Referees, known as asterisk summer Rudy's asterisk and asterisk second a Rudy's asterisk, kept a keen eye on the action. Think of them as the ancient world's answer to a soccer referee, only their calls held life or death consequences. They weren't there just to ensure fair play. They were also tasked with keeping things entertaining. A boring fight was a quick ticket to an unsatisfied crowd, and nobody wanted that. Speaking of the crowd, let's talk about their role in this gory theater. Imagine being in an arena where your fate could depend on the thumbs of thousands. Yes, the infamous thumbs up, or thumbs down, wasn't just a dramatic flair. It was a real decision-making process. But the gesture was a bit more complex than just a binary choice. The precise meaning of a thumb signal could vary, and some historians argue that a thumb turned towards the chest or held horizontally might have sealed a gladiator's fate. The emperor, or whoever was presiding, often had the final say, but the crowd's fervor was hard to ignore. They were there for the spectacle, for the tension of life balanced on the edge of a blade, and boy, did they get it. Now, let's talk about the stakes. The romantic image of gladiators fighting for honor and glory, mostly a myth. The truth is, gladiators were fighting for something much more tangible, survival. The average lifespan of a gladiator was about 25 years, and that's if you didn't get skewered by your opponent or mauled by a lion first. The risk of death or severe injury was as real as the swords they wielded. Inscriptions found at gladiatorial sites reveal a grim picture. Some matches resulted in death about 1 in every 9 or 10 fights. If you think those odds are favorable, you might need a new bookie. So, what was it about this brutal spectacle that captivated the Roman public? Why did they flock to the Colosseum like it was the hardest club in town? Part of it was the thrill of the unknown. Each match was an unpredictable dance of skill and survival, a chance to witness the extraordinary unfold in real time. But there was also a darker allure, the morbid fascination with blood and death. In a society where public executions were as common as a Sunday market, the games served as a visceral reminder of the empire's power over life and death. The gladiatorial games were a reflection of the Roman appetite for control and conquest, packaged as entertainment. But let's not forget the economic engine driving this whole bloody affair. Gladiators were commodities, valuable assets in a lucrative industry. They had sponsors, agents, and even fan clubs. Successful gladiators could earn hefty sums, sometimes comparable to a year's salary for a Roman soldier. Despite the inherent risks, this was a world where the promise of riches and fame could seduce even the most rational minds. And what about those so-called gladiatorial schools, or *ludi*? They were less Hogwarts and more high-stakes boot camp. Owned by wealthy entrepreneurs or the state, these schools were the breeding grounds for the spectacles in the arena. The Lannister, that hard-nosed trainer we mentioned earlier, wasn't just there to whip you into shape. He had a vested interest in your survival and success, because a dead gladiator meant a financial hit. The costs of feeding, housing, and training gladiators were steep, but the potential payout from a successful fighter made it all worthwhile. So, while the crowd saw only the glamour and the gore, you knew the reality was far grimmer. Sure, there were moments of glory, those fleeting seconds when you stood victorious, bloodied, but unbowed before a roaring sea of faces. But more often than not, the life of a gladiator was a relentless cycle of struggle, a fight not just against opponents, but against the very system that sought to exploit you. As you lay down on your straw mattress, the weight of the day still pressing on your shoulders, you can't help but wonder what lies ahead. Tomorrow could bring another victory, another step closer to that elusive prize of freedom. Or it could bring defeat, injury, or something even worse. But for now, there's nothing to do but rest, gather your strength, and prepare for the next round in this deadly game. In this world, you learn to appreciate the small victories. A day survived is a day one, a testament to your skill and tenacity. And as you drift off to sleep, the sounds of the barracks fading into the background, you know that whatever tomorrow brings, you'll face it head on. Because in the life of a gladiator, every day is a fight, and every fight is a chance to etch your name into the annals of history, even if it's just for a moment, under the unforgiving sun of the Roman Empire. But before the sand has even settled from today's spectacle, let's dive into the aftermath. You're back in the barracks, where the air is thick with the metallic scent of sweat and blood, and the reality of survival hits you like a Roman chariot. If you're lucky, you're nursing minor cuts and bruises, maybe a sprain or two. But for others, the injuries are more severe. A broken bone here, a deep gash there. The Lannisters not paying for a spa day, so you've got to make do with rudimentary medical care. Think vinegar-soaked bandages and a prayer to Asclepius, the god of healing, because he's about as close to a Medicare plan as you're going to get. And then there's the psychological toll. Imagine living in a constant state of fight or flight, with adrenaline as your daily companion. The arena might be silent now, but the echoes of the crowd's roar are still ringing in your ears. Surviving another day is a victory, sure, but it's also a reminder of your mortality, a reminder that your life hangs by a thread as tenuous as the whims of the crowd. For those who were once free men, the psychological burden is even heavier. Enslaved gladiators dream of freedom, a dream often as elusive as a mirage in the desert. The wooden sword of freedom, the Rudy's asterisk, is the ultimate prize, but not everyone makes it to that hallowed stage. The few who do earn it might find themselves thrown back into a world they've long been absent from, a world that moved on while they were locked in the cycle of combat. And yet, there's a seductive glamour to this life. Winning brings a fleeting glory, a moment of triumph when you're the hero of the hour. The crowd chants your name, and for a brief moment, you're more than just a fighter, you're a legend in the making. But as intoxicating as that sounds, it's a double-edged sword. Fame in the arena is as fickle as the Roman weather, and today's hero can be tomorrow's forgotten casualty. Now, let's talk legacy. The tale of the gladiator has echoed through history, morphing into myth and legend. These warriors, both revered and reviled, have left an indelible mark on popular culture. Fast forward a couple of millennia, and you'll find echoes of the gladiatorial games in everything from boxing matches to reality TV. The allure of witnessing the raw, unfiltered struggle of man versus man, or man versus beast, hasn't waned. Audiences today still crave that same adrenaline rush, that same sense of being part of something larger, even if it's from the comfort of a couch, rather than the stone seats of the Colosseum. But why does the story of the gladiators continue to captivate us? Perhaps it's the human fascination with the ultimate test of skill, strength, and will. Or maybe it's the romantic notion of the underdog, The idea that even in chains, a person can rise above their circumstances and achieve greatness. The Gladiator embodies the struggle against the odds, a timeless narrative that resonates with anyone who's ever faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge. However, let's not gloss over the grim realities. These were men, and sometimes women, forced into combat, their lives reduced to mere entertainment. The games were brutal, a stark reminder of the darker side of human nature and the lengths to which societies will go to maintain control and order. The Colosseum was a microcosm of Roman society, a place where power dynamics, social hierarchies, and political ambitions played out on a stage of sand and blood. The economic aspect is no less significant. Gladiators were big business, the superstars of their time, but like all stars, they were commodities to be bought, sold, and exploited. Their lives, while public and celebrated, were not their own. They belonged to the Lannister, to the crowd, and ultimately to the capricious whims of fate. So, as we wrap up this journey through the life of a gladiator, let's ponder the legacy they've left behind. The stories of these ancient warriors challenge us to reflect on our own society, to question what we value as entertainment and why. The Romans may have perfected the art of spectacle, but the questions their games raise about power, freedom, and human nature are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. In the end, the gladiator's tale is a mirror reflecting the complexities of human existence. It's a story of courage and desperation, of dreams and harsh realities, of fleeting glory and enduring myths. And as you drift off to sleep, perhaps with images of sand and steel dancing in your mind, remember that history isn't just a series of dates and events. It's the story of people, not so different from you and me, struggling to find meaning and purpose in a world that often seems as chaotic as the arena itself.